All right, everybody, we are ready to reconvene. Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. The time is now 11:37 a.m. and we are reconvening the performance oversight hearing today, now moving on to the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement for ONSE. ONSE was launched in 2017 to create a public health-based, community-oriented model of violence prevention and public safety. ONSE was created based on the premise that the overwhelming majority of serious violent crime is committed by a relatively small group of people, and that by identifying and engaging these individuals, we can drastically reduce violent crime in our city. ONSE has several core programs aimed at meeting this goal through different avenues, and I will highlight 3 of them for now. First, the ONSE Leadership Academy is a school-based program that works with high-risk kids in our schools, offering them support to address behavioral and attendance issues and academic struggles. Second, the Pathways program identifies individuals at highest risk of committing or being victims of violent crime and places individuals in a program that offers intensive training along with the jobs program. And third, the Violence Intervention Initiative uses a community-focused approach to reduce violent crime, often through violence interrupters. Violence interrupters are community members who are able to connect with at-risk individuals, build relationships with them, and hopefully deter them from violence. Violence interrupters also identify interpersonal conflicts that might lead to violence, and they work to facilitate ceasefires and mediations. Addressing and reducing gun violence is the #1 issue for me and this committee, and it is so top of mind for many district residents who are either experiencing the effects of gun violence for their families and their communities or a fear of it. So I am very eager to hear from ONSE about the vital work that they are doing to help address these issues and to continue making improvements. Far too often, we see that our perpetrators of some of these crimes are also falling victim to these crimes. And so it's very vital that we offer the supports that we need to keep our community alive as soon as possible. I'm just looking to see if I have any colleagues who have joined us. I don't see any. So we will follow the committee's normal practice and hear from public witnesses first, followed by our government witnesses. Public witnesses will have 3 minutes to present their testimony. Those who represent organizations will have 5 minutes. We will likely have 3 panels for today's hearing. So the first panel will be Brenda Richardson from PSA 702 Outreach Committee, Sandra Seegers from CRAV, Rachel Usden from Peace for DC, Michelle Chappell from Moms Demand Action, Dwayne Falwell from Together We Rise Community Development Model LLC, and Johnny Howard, Public Witness. Give you all a moment to enter panelists. And if you are ready, Ms. Richardson, we will start with you. And Akima, if we can get the clock ready to go for 5 minutes, please.
Good day, Chairman Pinto. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but I can't see you.
I'm on my phone and I've never used it on my phone before. I'm sorry.
No problem. If you'd prefer to keep your video off, that's no problem as well. But
Okay.
if you want to turn it on, it should be at the bottom left of your screen. If you click on the typeface. There we go.
Okay. Oh, you can only see the top of my head, but I'm here. My name is Brenda Lee Richardson. I am here representing Police Service Area 702. My community is still suffering from the collateral damage of the pandemic. It has imposed a veil of darkness on the walking wounded. Our plight continues to stem from collective trauma that ultimately impairs our behavioral and emotional health. We see with wounded eyes and listen with wounded ears. We are often very angry because the healing process has yet to commence. The Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement continues to do a yeoman's job of addressing the escalating violence in our disfavored neighborhoods. I often complain about the value of the violence interrupters. However, this year I am focused on doing whatever it takes to heal parts of our injured community that still seems to be on life support. Under the excellent leadership and guidance of Director Delano Hunter, I have come to learn that it is time for us to take a different approach to looking at the value of the ones and the hard work they are doing to save the perpetrators of violence. Dana McDaniels has been exceptional in her efforts to dig deeper, listen, and understand the needs of our respective communities as we often find ourselves under siege. All I do know is that I trust Director Hunter and Ms. McDaniels implicitly. I have come to realize that in our trauma, we see the glass as half empty while the folks at the ONSE see it as half full. Although there are millions of dollars, Chairman Pinto, funneled into programs in and outside of the DC government, I am concerned that the gun violence east of the river continues to escalate. However, I'm very grateful for the one's presence in our community and applaud their Herculean efforts to take a hands-on approach to embracing those who have strayed onto a destructive path. I have come to realize that their work is a form of healing for us. They are turning people's lives around. It takes patience, time, a great staff, and lots of funding. I value this agency and honor the monumental contributions they have made in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Richardson. Appreciate
My
that.
pleasure.
Next, we will hear from Rachel Usden from Peace for DC. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, Chairperson Pinto, members of the committee and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on behalf of Peace for DC. The U.S. Department of Justice defines their guiding principles for community violence intervention work, CVI work, as community-centered, equitable, and inclusive of survivors, evidence-informed, effective, and sustainable. CVI work forms the backbone of any city's alternative system of public safety and public health. Because gun violence is a public health issue, the violence spreads like a disease, infecting small social circles and acting as a contagion in communities that have been disadvantaged and disinvested for generations.
I testify.
CVI workers are uniquely capable.
I'm so sorry, Ms. Usden. If you could just pause for one moment. Oh, there we go. Okay, I think she was able to.
Nice.
I don't want to interrupt your time. Okay, please continue.
Okay, thanks. CVI workers are uniquely capable of curing this disease. Most CVI workers grew up in the neighborhoods that they serve, earning them respect and trust and inroads that are very challenging for police and government and others to build. The majority of CVI workers have had family and friends taken by gun violence. Many have been on both sides of the gun and have worked diligently to turn their own lives around. All CVI workers want to help others put down their guns and turn their lives around. The Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement is one of the district's main funders for CVI work. The agency operates several programs in-house, as you mentioned earlier, and they also contract with local community organizations to operate violence intervention sites, as you mentioned. In our testimony, we want to highlight the dedication that we've seen among the community organizations that contract with ONSE to operate violence intervention sites in DC. We also want to identify ways in which the ONSE agency can achieve greater results. Peace for DC works directly with the community-based organizations, CBOs, who contract with ONSE through the DC Peace Academy, where we provide advanced hands-on training for the CBOs employees, through a Peace Room initiative, where we convene the leadership of the CBOs to learn and strategize together, and through our other initiatives, including Peace Nights and Stop the Bleed workshops. We have seen firsthand how committed the CVI workforce is to this work. We've seen them work evenings and weekends and off days. We've seen them work together and take proactive steps to prevent retaliatory violence and other anticipated shootings. We've seen them grieve after a shooting occurs that they tried to squash. We know that with adequate training, capacity, and cooperation, DC's CVI workforce can not only stop shootings before they happen, but also help people build healthy lives and make communities safe for everyone. This is going to take a lot of work. There are no quick fixes or shortcuts. And I know that's difficult to acknowledge when you hear gunshots in your neighborhood or are afraid to go out at night. Peace for DC was founded with a great appreciation for and dependence on evidence-based proven models, data, transparency, accountability. We've talked with local and national experts and have steeped ourselves in the research. Following proven models with fidelity will bring peace to DC, and we want to help the ONSE be the best that it can be. DC needs a ONSE that works in conjunction with the rest of the city's violence prevention and intervention programs, of which there are many, as part of an overarching citywide strategy. DC needs a unified system for streamlined data tracking and information sharing. DC needs an independent evaluator with a feedback loop to continuously improve standards and processes. DC needs a ONSE that builds up the CBOs with the most credibility and community connections and encourages these organizations to work together. DC needs long-term holistic wraparound care delivered by trusted community, not short-term band-aids, to help people learn how to help themselves break out of the cycle of violence and trauma. DC needs to focus our most intense interventions on those at highest likelihood of being a perpetrator or victim, while also expanding the network of who is eligible for services to provide care for people who have not yet pulled the trigger or been shot, but are at serious risk, as well as expand services to include families and friends of victims who also are themselves at increased risk. Ultimately, it's not a bigger ONSE or a bigger government in general that will solve the district's violence epidemic. The best models that have worked in other cities and in the past in DC are the ones that are evidence-based and community-led. We need to build up the skills and capacity of DC's brave CBI workforce and empower them to bring about the peace that we all so desperately want. It's called community violence intervention, not government violence intervention. And we need government-funded solutions, not government-delivered solutions. It's a change in our way of thinking. It's a shift in the model. It's system change. But to stop the spread of disease and build a healthy, peaceful city, this is what we need to do. Thank you for listening to our testimony.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next, we will turn to Sandra Seegers from CRAVE or CRAV.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
And nice finally meeting you, council member.
You as well.
And good morning to you too, Delano. I'm messing with them. Okay, I'm Sandra S.S. Seegers, a Ward 8 resident, but I am not located immediately in a war zone. My main interest in ONSE is the ability to prevent crime. However, according to the numbers sent to me from the ONSE office yesterday, it seems the program is almost non-existent in Ward 8. The program is the violence interrupters. I have been at every hearing since the program began and have been persistent in asking that the budget be sufficient at the least to run a successful program of prevention. If the program is not funded, there's no way it is going to be successful. The areas that are covered, and this is the list I got yesterday, and the numbers: Woodland has 1 hired and 1 pending. Buena Vista Terrace have 2. Cedar Gardens, 1 hired, 1 pending. Savannah Terrace, 1 hired, 1 recruiting. Shibley Terrace, 1 with 1 recruiting. Historic Anacostia, 2. And Butler Gardens, 1 hired and 1 pending. The 7 locations on this list are not enough, and the number of interrupters is too few. We need trained interrupters around the clock in several areas. One of the interrupters said 4 interrupters to an area would be more feasible. The interrupters are around the clock workers. We're not actually working there on standby. ONSE is spending money on events in the Congress Park community separately from the money for the interrupters. It is hard to tell if the events are working because there are still too many shootings in Congress Park. I am asking that we get serious about the violence interrupters and fund it so we can see and feel measurable positive impact. And that ends my statement.
Thank you so much, Ms. Seegers. Appreciate that. Next, we will turn to Michelle Chappell from Moms Demand Action.
Hi, good morning, Chairperson Pinto and members of the committee and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. on behalf of the DC chapter of Moms Demand Action. My name is Michelle Chappell, and I've been a Ward 1 resident for most of my adult life. I'm a mom of 2 kids who attend a DC public charter school. Their school, for as long as we have been there, never experienced a shelter in place due to gun violence until this school year, and so far this year there have been 2. I'm here to encourage you to continue to fully fund the important violence prevention and intervention work that is carried out by the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. As this committee is well aware, although police data shows that violent crime overall was down in the district in 2022 compared to 2021, gun violence involving young people is on the rise. According to the Washington Post, in 2022, 16 children were killed and 82 were injured by guns. And there's no sign that this trend is slowing with the new year. I would like to take a brief moment of silence to acknowledge the 3 teenage lives already taken by gun violence in 2023, Martez Tony, Karan Blake, and Cordell Williams. Thank you. Moms Demand Action renews our call for multi-year contracts for violence interrupters. Violence intervention work requires a long-term, persistent, intensive commitment and the slow building of trust and relationships. Single-year contracts do not allow for the stability and the sustainability needed to effectively maintain a workforce of violence interrupters. Practically speaking, it is easier for VIs to focus on their jobs when they are not regularly facing job insecurity. Effective violence intervention also requires effective leadership. At Councilmember Charles Allen's Public Safety Roundtable on December 15th, we were pleased to learn that the mayor's office has placed its trust in Linda Harley Harper, the director of the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, to oversee the implementation of the Gun Violence Reduction Strategic Plan crafted by the National Institute for Criminal Justice Reform. To be empowered to carry out this oversight, as noted in Recommendation 14 of the strategic plan, Ms. Harper will need the authority to make decisions, use resources, give instructions, and manage staff involved in the implementation of this plan. This means collaboration with ONSE and specifically a qualified permanent ONSE director to work toward the goals laid out in the strategic plan. With my remaining time, I would like to share a personal story from this past year. After the Uvalde school shooting happened on Tuesday, May 24th, I went down to the White House that night for a vigil. And the rest of that week, my head was in the news as it continued to get worse. And by Saturday, I was ready for a mental health break. I decided to take my 9-year-old daughter shoe shopping. So we headed toward the Petworth Metro, which is just 3 blocks away from our house. And as we got closer, I saw the police tape, and then I saw the evidence markers on the street. And then we learned that there had been a shootout between people in 2 cars not 10 minutes before. So my mental health break that day was talking to my 9-year-old about how lucky we were that we hadn't left the house earlier because we could have been caught in the crossfire. This is why that I do the work that I do with Moms Demand, and why violence interruption is so necessary, because too many people in the city feel at risk of being caught in the crossfire. So in conclusion, MPD Chief Robert Conti said recently, and accurately, that we are in a country that is awash with guns. DC cannot solve that problem alone. What we can do is support the work that stops people from picking up a gun to solve their problems. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that story. Next, we will hear from Dwayne Falwell from Together We Rise Community Development Model, LLC. Okay, I don't think he is here. And do we have Johnny Howard, public witness? All right, so that will conclude this panel. I do have a couple questions for you all. If we could start the clock at HSEMA, because there may be some other colleagues who return. Thank you all so much for sharing your perspective and your testimony. That was very powerful to hear. And one thing that continues to be consistent, I think, is the desire for these programs to work and demonstrate their effectiveness so we can know what to do next, because clearly the current state of affairs is not acceptable. I want to start with you, Ms. Richardson. Are you still on here? Or we may have lost her. Okay. So, Ms. Seegers, you talked about some of the problems with the neighborhood interrupters, both with, having events, but then not effectively intervening in violence. Do you think that ONSE has overextended in the number of neighborhoods that they're serving and instead should be focusing on building up each neighborhood that's experiencing the most violence first before expanding resources to new neighborhoods?
Yes, I agree with what you just said. They should. However, the 7 over here in Ward 8, it's about at least 5 more areas that need their coverage, need to be covered, and they need more than one person. I talked to one of the violent interrupters yesterday to see how it was working. She said it's one. She's the only one working in her area. And I guess the list that I was given, they're looking for another person or a name is there, but 2 is not enough. And it's 4 is not enough. 5 is not enough. We just don't know what enough is. I know it's more than 2. And we have other areas, because where I live, I can hear gunshots from the east, the west, the north, and the south all the time. Helicopters flying over all the time. I mean, it's not good. So the interrupters, I think the reason for the interrupters is an excellent idea, but we need them. We need them. Everybody asking where. And I got that list yesterday from Dana. I was shocked to see that there's 1 and 2 only. And I don't see them because they won't be on my street because the shootings are not actually here. But people who live in those areas, they don't see them because they're not there. So we need at least 5 or 6 in one area for them to be productive. And we need to cover more areas. The 7 that they are doing, they need more there right now.
Okay, thank you very much. And Ms. Usden, you talked about the skills capacity of the violence interruption workers. Can you elaborate on what you think we need to change in terms of training? And also, when we talk about kind of more community involvement and less government involvement, what do you think that kind of looks like in practice when we are making government investments? So of course we need to be, involved in oversight and coordination that these investments are being spent well. What does that look like in practice to have less government involvement?
Sure. I'll just, if you can, quickly just piggyback on what Ms. Seegers was saying, because I completely agree. And if you compare the funding and staffing levels of the cure sites versus the ONSE sites, the cure sites have more staff at each of their sites. So, we've talked over the years many times about whether or not those programs will ever be coordinated, combined or not, but to the extent that they ever are, or we ever want to bring the ONSE staffing levels up to meet the size of the cure ones, that would be great. But to answer your question about the training, unfortunately, a lot of the folks who are hired to be CPI workers don't get a lot of training. Bless you.
Thank you.
Sadly, I feel terrible seeing what's happened with a lot of the recent incident with the safe passage worker and other incidents recently. They're not being provided with a lot of great training. That's why we started the DC Peace Academy. We feel really proud of the training that we're providing for the workers there. They're getting classes in how to mediate conflicts, how to resolve disputes, as well as mental health, healthy masculinity, cognitive behavioral theory, how to use Narcan, how to do Stop the Bleed, and how to think differently, how to, what it means to be a peacemaker and be empowered to do this work, because those workers do know their neighborhoods and have incredible trust and credibility, and they all want to do a good job. So I think the more training we can give them, the better. And in terms of like the government funded question, there's a huge challenge in getting access to the necessary resources. There's just a huge bottleneck, lots of red tape, lots of bureaucracy. So to the extent that we can put our trust into the community organizations and give them, the skills to be able to, if we don't have the trust, then let's empower them to meet the standards that we need them to meet. But like the community organizations and the community has the ability to help get the resources to the people who need them the most in a much faster way than the government. And so we've seen it in the past, and we've seen it in other cities. These programs should be run by the community, and they should be empowered to be able to get people access to the resources they need quickly, because people are in crisis and they can't wait.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for that. It's really helpful context. Ms. Chappell, I'm so sorry about the experience with your daughter, and thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that is far too common for so many district residents. If you wouldn't mind sharing what you think would be the most effective resource kind of right away in providing supports for something like that. And also you mentioned the importance of having multi-year contracts so that our violence interrupters can build up trust in the community. Are you aware of other jurisdictions that are doing that well and investing in longer or multi-year contracts for this work?
That's a good question about the multi-year contracts. I know that there are some places that get multi-year grants from like private sources. I'm not aware of jurisdictions that have multi-year government contracts, but I can definitely look into that and see if I could add that to my written testimony. And Rachel actually might know more about this issue than I do. She has worked on that in the past, I think. And as far as support, do you mean support for, could you clarify your first question about, do you mean support for like someone like me and my daughter, or in experiencing something like a near miss with, or what do you?
I guess I mean the kind of trauma and mental health challenges associated with, either a near miss or gun violence in someone's community,
Right.
Kind of right away to address
Right.
that.
Yeah. That's something that I've had to deal with, unfortunately, on several occasions, because there have been shootings on playgrounds. There's the rec center around the corner from my house. The Parkview Rec Center has had a couple shootings in the vicinity, and I have known kids that were in the area when there was a shooting. And there are some like online resources about how to talk to your kid and that kind of thing. But it's a difficult thing, I think. I do think more presence of it, specifically at the Petworth Metro. I think more presence of something that was like a like what we have at the schools would be helpful, especially during the morning and afternoon rush hour. Something a visible presence that would help deter these incidents from happening in the first place. And that's why I think preventive work is the most important thing to stop these incidents from happening in the first place, rather than reacting after they happen. That's why, that's the mission of ONSE in the first place.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And we're out of time for this round, but Ms. Usden, I just want to give you a brief chance to address what we were talking about, the multi-year contracts, if you have experience in seeing that working in other jurisdictions.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a horrible example, but the DC's animal control contract is a 5-year contract. So this is not something that DC doesn't do normally for lots of things. But a better example is the Grid Foundation in LA, which was set up to be a bridge between government and community. And it's funded by government and philanthropy. And it's a way to help funnel the resources and funding into community-based organizations.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you to this entire panel. Really appreciate you being here today and your very helpful, informed perspective, and looking forward to working with you all throughout the year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Next, we will turn to our second panel. We will have Dwayne Falwell from Together We Rise Community Development Model, LLC, Pastor Lethea Pinder, Public Witness, Robert Fenner, Public Witness, Abdul Moore, Public Witness, Melissa Miner, Public Witness, and Dwayne Coleman from the ONSE Leadership Academy. Excuse me, we'll put Mr. Coleman on panel 3.
Good morning.
We can go ahead and get started with Dwayne Falwell. If Akima, you can pull up the clock, and please go ahead when you're ready.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dwayne Falwell, and I represent Together We Rise, and also our contract under ONSE Violent Intervention Initiative. I've been basically with the initiative since 2018, I'm sorry, since 2018 when it first was launched. And I've seen the program grow in many ways over that time. When we first started in 2018, by being new and the work hasn't been done in the city probably in 8 years before that time, since I guess the Peace of Hearts and a few other organizations have been in place. Formally, we came in kind of new and not having really a full direction. Our model was based out of Los Angeles. We studied under Kill Bashir, and the model was a great model coming in, but we found out the model didn't really fit the stuff that we did. Instead, we don't have gangs, we have crews. So initially, we just had to figure it out. Since that time, under the leadership of David McDaniel and some of the new people that came aboard from that time, we began to get to the nitty-gritty of the work. Basically understanding what the problems were in the city, with the individuals, with the populations. And over that time, we've come to do some great work. Since 2018, in my area, which I represent Ward 6 and 7, we've put together a ceasefire between two communities that's been having a conflict for over 30 years, which is Simple City and 37th Place Northeast. We've had a ceasefire in place with those two areas for over 500 days at this time. People can come out the communities, cook on the grill, and walk the community in peace, which something they wasn't able to do a couple of years ago. Also, at this present time, we've got a early similar situation going on between Lincoln Heights and Clay Terrace, and so the program is evolving, evolving with the knowledge of the individuals, the needs, and the problems that we're dealing with. There's a lot of different issues involved. Some of it's rap music, some of it's lack of opportunity. It's many things. We know that the populations have changed since 2000 through our data. We know we targeted age 16 to probably, actually 18 to probably 28. We know now that the population has changed between 12. We have 12-year-old shooters at this time. So we know that the resources that they might face are different from the ones that we were able to provide for the older generation. But that's through the hard work of the agency and the people that's involved in the agency and the daily commitment that we have as we try to navigate to make our city a better place. What I do know is the dedication and the resources that we have from the city, and we are very appreciative of what the city's provided in a way of funding these ventures that we try to save lives and try to put people in a trajectory to be better people, productive citizens, and basically to save a life. And all I want to finish off, and I don't have much to say after this other than the fact that I appreciate the work that the ones have allowed us to do as Together We Rise and my other colleagues that's doing this work to continue to try to save lives in our city. Now, end of the day.
Thank you so much, Mr. Falwell. I appreciate you testifying today. Next, we will turn to Pastor Lethea Pinder, public witness.
Greetings, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but I can't see you. But if you prefer to keep your video off, that's no problem.
Okay. Can you see me now?
Yes, I can see and hear you.
Okay, wonderful. Well, praise God. Good afternoon. Are we at noon? Yes, we're afternoon. To Chairperson, to the Judiciary and Public Safety Committee, and to ONSE agency. My name is Pastor Lethea Pinder. I'm the mother of the slain Antoine Lamont Pierce. He was murdered on the streets of Washington, D.C. on Bennett Road on December the 11th, 2020. Since that time, 3 days after my son was murdered, I received a call from ONSE, from the FSS department, from Mr. Jeffrey Hill. And since then, they have walked with me. They've offered grief counseling, in which I took great advantage of. They offered counseling to my 6 grandchildren who belonged to my son who was murdered. And they also have offered counseling to my other family, my children, the deceased siblings. I've been to some of the peace ceremonies that they've had there and listened to some of the other victims. And as I've listened on these hearings, and I've been involved with a lot of gun violence, actually it has propelled me to be a gun violence advocate because my son was murdered so senselessly on the streets. And I mean that literally on the streets. He was driving in his vehicle and he was murdered. He was shot while his 5-month-old baby was in the car. Since then, I have been we've been to sentencing. The young man was sentenced. And since then, ONSE has always been there for me. My point of contact has been Mr. Hill, but I've met the other members there, and they have always been so loving, so compassionate. I've also done some work with video and audio with 202 for Peace. But FSS has really supported me. Out of nowhere, I'll get a call, how am I doing? And has really offered a sense of continual support. You know, I listened to the information about the VIs, and I understand they're the violence interrupters. But after that does not work, then the work falls on FSS. It falls on those that have to be dealt with after the crime, because after the crime, after the murder, after the families have been affected, sometimes people don't know where to go, and some people don't have a support system. So I have a wonderful support system, and I consider ONSE, the FSS, I consider that one of my great support system, and I'm so very thankful for all of you all's time. God bless.
Pastor, thank you so much for your testimony and your just unbelievable strength in continuing on in the face of a terrible, senseless murder of your son. Thank you, and I'll have some questions for you in a moment at the end of this panel. Next, we will hear from Robert Fenner, public witness.
Hello? Can you all see me?
Hi, I can hear you, but I cannot see you.
Hold on, I'm trying to, can you all see me now?
Yes, I can see and hear you. Go ahead
Good
whenever you're
afternoon.
ready.
Okay, how you all doing? Good afternoon. My name is Robert Fenner, and I'm here to speak on the behalf of the People of Promise program, whatever have done for me and how it helped me in a good way. A few months before People of Promise reached out to me, I was not connected to any services. I was in a dark place in my life, and I didn't know what particular place I was going in my life. Once the program Pathfinders connected with me, they represented me and got me job training through Project Empowerment. From there, I was assigned to subsidized employment at DOES in Washington, D.C. In October, with the help of People of Promise, I secured full-time employment with a D.C. government agency. The People of Promise has been instrumental with connecting me with counseling service, and I'm well on my way to securing permanent housing with their assistance. The People of Promise have had a monumental impact on my current success and my success now, and I'm extremely excited and encouraged about my future. Also, the program also helping me out ways that it's keeping me out of trouble. At first, I seen myself getting a lot of trouble with the law enforcement. Now I have not been arrested. Now a lot of guys in my community looking up to me and wanting to know how can they get help the same way through the program. And that's the end. That's the end of my testimony.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, and I appreciate you testifying today.
Thank you.
Next, we will hear from Abdul Moore, public witness.
Hello?
Hi, we can hear you but cannot see you.
I'm trying to get on there now. Oh, yeah, I do.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Y'all can see me?
I can hear and see you. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. How y'all doing? I'm Abdul Moore, speaking on behalf of the People of Promise program. First thing I wanted to tap into was I appreciate the people, for the mayor, the city, for even giving the program a chance, an opportunity, even outreach with the communities and neighborhoods and people in the community and neighborhoods. To be honest, this program changed a lot of people's lives, especially mine, being as though what was going on in the streets and what I've already been through, past traumas. You know, certain things, the lights you don't see yourself doing or accomplishing once you've been through stuff or just traumatic by certain incidents that happened already. So being able to have an opportunity to get in the program was kind of like a big step for me. And it changed my life because I had a son, I had a kid, but being as though when you have a job, you know, it kind of focuses you more on responsibilities and more important things in life and stuff that you want to see out of life and things you don't want your kids to go through that you had to go through. So I think by me joining this program, it changed me dramatically. And to see, and for my other peers and younger peers to see me and know what I've already been through and what they used to seeing, and then seeing the transition into the work life, it kind of give them more of a hope of life too, being as though they can see that if he can do it, I can do it. You know, so program, it's a huge plus to the city. We need more workers, and I feel as though the program is actually working more effectively because they hire people that are amongst the peers that are in the community and in the neighborhoods. Whereas though the people have a better understanding, gravitate towards the workers better instead of just a lot of people that they don't really know and not really trying to break their shell to get to know. Whereas though you got people that they're already familiar with, that they'll listen to and make better decisions in life because they see what we already doing it ourselves. So I feel as though the program should be funded for a long time, to be honest. And the program should be funded for a long time. And I really appreciate the program or the opportunity to even be in the program because it helped me dramatically. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moore. I really appreciate your testimony.
You're
I
welcome.
have some questions for all of you. If you are all here and can turn your video on. So I want to start with you, Mr. Falwell. Thank you so much for highlighting some of the distinctions between crews versus gangs, and hoping you can elaborate a little bit more on why that distinction matters, why it's not just a definition, but how it kind of affects our violence interruption efforts here in DC.
Sure. So, as I spoke about crews and gangs don't normally they have a shot caller, and the shot caller is one who definitely is the final say of all decisions being made, right? And so, you talk about the Bloods, we talk about the Crips, we talk about those different facets of gang lifestyle, and those lifestyles is normally a leader. Well, in DC, we don't have that type of even in our prison system. Like, so, if you get in most prison systems, you have a shot caller, so they can start the violence, or they can stop the violence. Whatever they say is what it goes. You know what I mean? So, in DC, we don't have that. We have more so loose-lit groups of individuals that come from certain areas. So you might, and we talked about 37 similar cities. So you have guys that claim a pocket, right, or a street, and that's considered what we call a crew. And so no one actually dictates to those guys what's next. You know what I mean? So even with a crew, you might have one guy that feels a certain way, another guy might feel another way. One guy might say, we want to go do this. And another guy said, well, I ain't doing that. But with a gang is basically one all in, right? So that's what we had to distinguish the difference when we had to break the model down and start reinventing our model to fit our city.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful, an important element of how to be effective and intervening in this violence, understanding those makeups. You talked a little bit about music. Can you elaborate on that and kind of what you're seeing with trends or other ways that we can use music to understand what's happening or intervene?
Yes, I can. So at the ones always we meet every Tuesday, and we talk. We actually go into a deep dive into what's going on with the culture and what's driving certain elements of violence in our city. What we find in music is not so much the music, but it's the lyrics that's coming out. So we see that the trends of a beef could start, or a violence act could start off words where one person might say something negative in reference to another neighborhood through song, and that's usually dropped off YouTube or on the internet. And so, and that's kind of whole nother thing, because I think that's kind of a model that started in Chicago with the trill music through the King Von era, where a lot of guys got record deals through negative lyrics and behavior because of the likes. And we call it at Together We Rise, we have a thing, model or curriculum that we call social currency. In my era, and I used to be part of the problem at one time before I became part of the solution. In our area, one of our biggest things that we had issues about, we fought about money and territory and things to do with that, but it was currency as we know it, and the money term. Well, the currency that we see now is called social currency, that we consider social currency because they do a lot of things for the likes. That's their currency, the likes, the admiration of being respected through being a valid individual, or being the most, the most notorious that you could be. That gives them a sense of currency of being of fitting in and being getting their respect now. So these are things that we're working on through the ones always. We're going to have a summit where we bring in some executives, let them know that we're not, let some top executives know that we're not signing people for this type of music anymore. So these are things we're working on. Also, we're trying to change the norm and the lyrics. We've had some of the rappers that were talking negative in the community. We've had them to change the lyrics, sit down with us and talk about what the repercussions of those lyrics are.
Thank you so much. I think that's so powerful. And I just want to dive into this a little bit more. So when you have those meetings and can see what's being said and through the lyrics, what's the kind of next step? You said you're meeting with some folks to let them know the impacts of it, but what's being successful in getting through to people of the impact of those words? Or are there other interventions that you all or the city can be taking in that space?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these individuals, they are looking for studio time, and they're looking for ways to be back financially. But when we're trying to find those resources for those individuals to use, but one of the things that we're propagating is that if you come in with the negative music and the lyrics, that we're not going to find resources for you to move those forward. So that's one of the things we use. But we know that's sometimes some of those communities, some of these guys have a lot of resources because they're in the street as well. We understand it as well. But we know that if they're not going to get a deal based off of being at that negative genre, then that's a way to change some of the outlook on how they move the music, what they say when they speak the rap songs or whatever, sing or whatever the music, whatever they're doing. I mean, it's just a change the narrative by not making it a benefit for them. Because if they see a benefit in doing it, they're getting rewarded for the negative lyrics. Then guess what? They're not going to ever change. So we're trying to find a way to be the bridge between the record label and let them understand that, look, by you doing this, you're creating a situation in our communities, and not just in Washington, D.C., but all over the country, where we're getting a lot of negative homicide, the narrative and the way they think, and they want to be like, I know when I was coming up, some of the rappers, they were called studio gangsters, right? So a studio gangster was a guy that was probably talking about it but never did it. Well, these guys are actually doing these things, and so that gives them the credibility, and they think that's going to move them in sales and likes, and that's going to translate into money and financial gain. So we're trying to figure a way to stop that in the tracks.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Fall. I really appreciate the work that you're doing in this space. And I'll just note, in a recent visit to the DC jail, I was meeting with a group of young men, and I asked them what we as a city could have done differently or better to intervene earlier. And all of them said, it's all in the music. It was all about the music. If the music had been clearer, we wouldn't be where we are. And that has stayed with me. And I'm going to follow up with you and see how we can support your efforts so we can keep that conversation going. So thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Pastor Pinder, thank you so much again for sharing your story about your son and the effects that really ripple to you in losing a child, to your other children and his siblings, to his children. It is such a clear example of how terrible this gun violence is and the effects that it has on our community. And I really appreciate you being here and sharing that. You talked about some of the peace ceremonies that ONSE has offered. Can you elaborate on what those looked like and how, or if they helped you in any way and why?
Absolutely. I actually have attended two because, again, it's been a little over 2 years since my son was murdered. And the team puts together a setting, a very peaceful setting. And they have a clinical, I believe she's a clinical psychologist that's there. And everyone shares their stories. And as they share their stories, you sort of forget yours for just a brief moment, and you tend to fall and listen to theirs, and your heart, well, me anyway, extends to those stories. And I have spoken to many, many people about that, about my heart, my bleeding heart. My heart is still bleeding. But when I go to ceremonies that have been put together, that FSS ONSE puts together, it allows me to hear other testimonies and let me know that I'm not by myself. They also have the employees there that work for that division. They also share what they do and what the purpose of the team is, what the purpose of that agency is. It may be something you come and sit, the last one that I went to last week, actually, there were some new people, some new faces for new murdered victims on the streets of Washington, D.C., mothers of children, small children, sons and daughters. And it leaves such a heartening effect. It's like a domino effect of pain, grief. And a lot of people are angry. And that's a place, they set a place where we can come and let that out, a place where we can come and talk, a place where we can come and see that there's there is someone else outside of ourselves. You know, when you do a one-on-one therapy, me being a pastor, I do Christian therapy. I do Christian counseling all the time. And so I know what that looks like. But when grief counseling is so different, when you're in a setting, you know how they have the NA and the AA groups, you know, people feel like they're not by themselves. And so that's sort of the setting that we have. Is just, unfortunately, we're in a setting for something that we didn't do, something we didn't choose to do, but we've been brought together. And they do this so eloquently. And then they speak to us. The first year I went, they gave us all gifts. And then when I got home, the blankets that remind me of where we all want to be said peace and love and joy. And then they feed us really, really good. The food is delicious, but I've also been invited through FSS to speak to or do a video for 202 for Peace, as well as a segment, a snippet for radio advertising for the agency. So I'm just thankful for the group as they allow these events to come together. And as I say, I thank God for every department, every division in the districts that's against crime, from the mayor's office, the police department, and definitely we're talking about ONSE today. But the effect of this, the pain, the victims, because that's why we're here. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about the victims. Victims generally of someone that has been murdered or shot or stabbed. And then you have the families. We are the ones that are left with that. We are the ones that are left with that. And that program has helped me tremendously, again, from the grief counseling. And there are perfect resource center that if they cannot help directly, they know exactly where to send you to.
Thank you
You're
so
so
much. Sounds like a really important support community to turn this senselessness into love and spreading peace. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, you're quite welcome.
Mr. Fenner and Mr. Moore, if you're still here, thank you so much for sharing your experience with the people of Promise. I want to just hear a little bit more in detail about your experience, if you wouldn't mind sharing, from the point of connection and how that kind of turned things around for you as we're looking at the program and how to continue supporting it most effectively. Hearing your circumstances with your interaction with the program will be helpful.
Yes, how you doing? Yeah, so the program.
I can't hear you, it's breaking up.
Mr. Moore, your video looks frozen, so maybe we can hear from Mr. Fenner first, and then hopefully your service will reconnect. If not, you could try taking your video off. That sometimes helps. Go ahead, Mr. Fenner.
Yes, yeah. So the program helped me a lot, you know. So I was going through a lot of my life. I didn't have the resources to try to get a job, housing. I was homeless, you know. I was going through a lot. So the program reached out to me, People of Promise, and you know, they started giving me counseling, helping me like get job training and everything, stuff like that, you know. So once I started doing that in my community, I became a role model. You know, I got started saving other people's lives, you know. So I connect other people in my community to People of Promise. They was able to get the help too, also, you know. And People of Promise is a good program, you know. Like it is. I'm doing better now in my life, you know. I have a DC government agency job, you know. They help me with housing. They doing a lot with me. I'm going to counseling, you know. I'm getting therapy. So it's a lot. They doing a lot to help the community and help DC as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm glad that it was so helpful for you, and thank you for giving back now and sharing your story. Mr. Moore, can you share some specifics about your circumstances with your interaction with People for Promise? Mr. Moore, we may have lost your connection. If you're still here, I would try maybe taking your video off. Sometimes that helps. And we can see if we can hear you.
I can't hear you. Can you repeat that one more time?
Okay, yes, I can hear you now. I was asking if you can explain some specifics of yours, circumstances and your interaction with people of
I
promise.
keep going in and out.
Okay. Okay. Well, don't worry about it. I know sometimes these connections are tough. So I think we'll move on to the next panel. But thank you for being here. Thank you all for
Can
being
you
here.
hear me?
Appreciate you.
Okay.
It keeps going in and out.
I think it's a little bit hard to hear you, Mr. Moore. So we're going to move on to the next panel, but thank you so much.
Hold on.
Thank you all. Okay, so we now are ready for our third and final panel.
Can you hear me now?
We have Dwayne Coleman,
Can you still hear me?
ONSE Leadership Academy. Mr. Moore, we can hear you now, but we're going to move on to our next panel. Let's see. Okay, so we have our third and final panel for public witnesses, Dwayne Coleman from the ONSE Leadership Academy from Paul Middle School, Devin Douglas from the ONSE OLA program, Antoine Wood from the ONSE OLA program. I think some of the other folks on this panel are not yet here, so we'll get started, and if the others arrive, we will let them in. But Mr. Coleman, if you are here.
Hello?
Hi, we can hear you. We're going to hear from Mr. Coleman first from the ONSE Leadership Academy.
Hold on real quick. Hold on real quick.
Sorry, can you hear me? Mr.
I'm trying to
Coleman?
get somewhere I can speak at real quick.
Mr. Coleman, we can hear you if you're ready to go, but if you need another minute, we can move to another witness first.
Oh no, I'm ready.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, I'm ready. Hello?
Hi, we can hear you. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay, what question you gotta ask me?
If you're ready to give your testimony.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Okay, please go ahead.
So last year I went to McKinney Tech. It was a DC public school, and I was just like in a lot of gang beef, a lot of street beef, a lot of music, different people and stuff. Then after that, I was getting jump and stuff, and I was just doing bad stuff. I was not doing great. I was smoking weed. I was just not doing my best as a child, as a teenager. Then after that, I came to Paul. Then after I came to Paul, I've been doing great. I joined an all-out group. They help me on stuff. They help me on my anger problems. Every time, like I'm mad in class, they come back. They take me to the room. They make sure I eat. Then they come. Then I go back to the class. And they reset my mind for a great mindset. And that's it. Did you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I said, did you hear me when I said?
Yes, we can hear you the whole time.
Oh yeah, that's all. That's all I gotta say. It's basically I was just doing bad. Then the all-out group came. I came to Paul Charter School, and the all-out group they came and helped me. They saw my anger problem, so I'm doing better on my anger. Like if I'm mad at somebody, I just put my head down and I just zone out. Then after that, after I cool down, I zone back in and I do my work and I pay attention to class.
Thank you very much. Is that the end of your testimony?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much. Next, we will hear from Devin Douglas. Okay, I don't see Devin. So we will go to Antoine Wood.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for being here. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Well, my name is Antoine Wood. I'm 25 years old. I just got with the ONSE program and the outreach program last year, the end of last year, around like October. And I can sit right here and tell you guys that they helped me with my anger. I can tell y'all that they helped me be a better person. But that's not the truth. What I could say that they had helped me with was building my courage up to go out for my dreams and knowing how to cope with my decisions. Like basically thinking about what I want to do before I just go out and go do it. And now I'm a chef. I'm doing exactly what I wanted to do. I love cooking. Cooking is for the soul. It's not for the evil. So that's one thing that I can say that they led me to. They helped me with my resume, something that I did not really learn how to do in school, which my school ain't really teach me because it was the type of school that I went to. So I didn't really know how to make resumes, and I didn't know anything about cover letters, and I'm just working better with working with people now. They taught me how to be not a follower but a leader, and how to work with a team instead of trying to hog time and hog everything to yourself. There's always somebody there that's gonna help you. You know, they gave me that courage where I feel like I can trust somebody now because they was there for me when I really needed them. You know, and I also went into the Pathways program, so I went through that for 9 weeks. So, you know, that gave me the extra boost. You know, I just want to thank everybody that's been included with it. You know, everybody that had a hand on with this program, and I hopefully it just keep going and it get better and better, and our youth, you know, can grab their hands onto it and they can do better. As you know, they probably don't even have to, because this program teach you how to make your floor your kids' ceiling. You know what I'm saying? If you understand what I'm saying, my floor will be their ceiling. They won't have to worry about going through the same things that I went through. So, you know, that's part of my testimony. You want anything else to know? You know, you ask me any type of questions you want.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wood. I really appreciate hearing from you and your perspective. And you talked about the kind of transition and the work to getting you into doing different things. Was there anything that was particularly effective in those conversations and getting you onto a different path?
Well, yeah, because a couple of people that had them conversations with me and was teaching me them things, they also went through some of the things that I went through. Like, so I got shot in my head 3 years ago. You know, I got shot in my head and I got shot in my leg, and I seen death. You know, so it was really kind of hard for me to trust anybody that was around me. That's like, it was hard for me to trust family and all. But one thing that I can say that stuck to me when what they said was, pain, it comes and goes. You know, pain come and go, but family lasts forever. You know, so that's one thing that I did. I built a family and a foundation. I didn't just, when I had this opportunity, I ain't just bring myself into it. I brought other people that was around me with me, so they can learn how to build a business, so they can learn how to create an LLC, so they can learn how to get a food handler license or a flagger's license or whatever they want to do. Like, whatever they want to do, go for it, but just know you have to study before you do it. That's what I meant by thinking about what you want to do before you do it. You gotta study everything that you want to do before you do it, even if you feel like you're the best at it. Because everybody has to practice. So that's one thing that stuck to me. What they said to me: family matters. Family lasts forever. The pain, it just come and go.
That's really powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think we may have one more public witness. Jaru Gathers, if you are here, please go ahead.
Yes, I'm here. How you doing?
I'm doing well.
I'm trying to see how I turn the camera. 1 second. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. I am Jaru Gathers. I'm a graduate from the ONSE office. I did 9 weeks in the ONSE office, and it helped me change my life in so many ways. Like, I can start crying right now. How powerful, how much they helped me, my kid, my family, everything. Like the situation I'm in now, I want to be in it for them. If it wasn't for the ONSE office, I got a great government job now. It did so much for me. It put an end to the negativity I was doing when I was growing up. You know, I got the same stories all the young Black men that's in here as well. I feel like ONSE is a very powerful program that's needed in the streets right now in DC because what's going on. But because they help you in so many ways to be successful in life, even if you fail a million times, they still pick you up a million times to be successful. So I feel like ONSE is a great office. It's a great program. I feel like that it's needed a lot. I love it. I can start naming all types of names, Miss Atara, Miss Kenya. Like I got so many messages I text, like 15 paragraphs of thanking them how much they changed my life from me being in a bad situation to a great situation. Like from stressing all the time in just a dark room to being in a big room with a light with just all joy, happiness. Like I love it. I'm so grateful for them. I'm grateful for the opportunity they gave me. They changed my life in so many ways, just like these other gentlemen. And I hope that they succeed forever because it's a great program and you can't do no wrong. Because I was going through this dark time. I ain't have nobody to call on, and they called me, and I didn't know about the program. They came and got me for the 9 weeks. It stopped me from getting in trouble. Only got locked up one time, but it stopped me from getting locked up, being violent. No, they help you a lot, and it's a great program, and it helped me and my family be successful to this day right now, as I'm working on getting fully employee to this government job I am at right now. So in my opinion, I feel like the ONSE office is the best solution for the community and for the people, period. For people, family, if they're going through anything, they always there for you. They got all the solutions. They can help you. If you don't got no way to get to the program, they can get you a ride. So it's really no excuses. They help you in so many ways, and I feel like it's a blessing. And it changed a lot of people's lives in DC. And I know a couple that graduated from the program as well as me, who got great jobs as well as me. So I feel like this is a great program. I could just keep going. It's a great program. I love it. It still got me succeeding in life. And that's my testimony. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Others, I really appreciate you sharing your story, and I'm so glad that ONSE was able to help.
Thank you so much.
When you said you didn't know about the program and they came and got you, can you talk a little bit more about what that looked like, what those conversations were like, and why they worked for you to say, okay, I'm ready to get some services? Okay, so how that goes is, so if you been in a situation in a community and it no matter if it's bad, good, no matter what it is, but if it's been good, but if it's been bad, they're gonna contact you. No matter, just if you just got out of jail, they're gonna contact you. If you just got shot, they're gonna contact you. So I was going through something, and they just strictly contacted me out of nowhere. And at the beginning, it was bumps in the road because I thought they was lying. You know what I'm saying? That's everybody. Everybody gonna think they lying, but they didn't lie. They helped me with bills. They helped me with everything that I needed to be successful for me and my daughter. They helped me with to this day, and they still help me with right now. As we speaking right now, they still help me. There's no excuses not to be successful going through the ONSE.
you're going to be successful if you go to ONSE program, because I'm successful to this day. And I was before the night we started, I was in a dark place. I probably was thinking about just giving up on my daughter, giving up on my life. ONSE brought me up with the counseling. I don't really talk to no one about my problems. But I feel like this new job that they got me is the greatest thing ever. I love my manager, Miss Love. She's great to me, because I had bumpy roads at the beginning because I'm 21, so I'm in the mindset like I want to have fun, you know what I'm saying? But now I'm elevated. Now that I got the ones, they help me mature. They help me be a better man, be a better father, be a better person. The job I got helped me be a better person to the people, because I'm not used to talking to people. So that's my perspective on that.
Well, thank you so much. It's
Welcome.
really wonderful to hear your story. I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So that concludes our public witnesses for today's hearing. I will now call our government witness, Delano Hunter, Interim Director of the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. Thank you for being here, Director. And it is the tradition of this committee to swear in all government witnesses who appear before it. So if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear?
Hi, Councilmember. So I just wanted to add that I am joined by other government witnesses. Sorry about that. Just want to add that I am joined by Marcus Ellis, Satara Yale, and Dana McDaniel. They will testify and present alongside me. Just wanted to add that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Welcome to you all. So if you could all raise your right hand, I'll ask you all to be sworn in. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you are about to provide before the Council of the District of Columbia and this committee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. I would now like to invite you, Director Hunter, to make any opening statement you may have.
All right, absolutely. We do have a presentation that will accompany my testimony, and Ms. Yale is going to share her screen now before I. Okay, actually, can the committee grant Ms. Yale access to be able to share her video, share her screen rather?
Sure. Akima, are you able to do that from your end? Just give us one moment to get organized. While we figure that piece out, I see we have been joined by our at-large colleague, Christina Henderson. Thanks so much for joining us. Councilmember Henderson, who's also a member of this committee. If you have an opening statement, Councilmember, no, okay. So Director, we're having some trouble with the screen share. Just give us one more minute, and if not, we may need to proceed without that. One moment. All right, I can see your presentation. So Director, whenever you are ready to go ahead.
All right, thank you so much, Councilmember Pinto, and good to see you, Councilmember Henderson. Good afternoon, members and staff of the Committee on the Judiciary and Public Safety. My name is Delano Hunter, and I'm proud to serve as the Interim Executive Director of the Safer, Stronger DC Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. And I'm pleased to testify today. Joining me is the ONSE Chief of Staff, Marcus Ellis, Deputy Director Dana McDaniel, and our Strategy and Innovation Officer, Satara Yale. I'm pleased to provide you with an update on the impactful work of the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement and our partners and what we have accomplished together over the past year. Since our founding Each year has brought us additional programming to develop our service continuum and more staff and funding to increase our capacity to serve district residents. FY22 and FY23 Building Blocks DC strategic investments have yielded transformational growth for the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, allowing us to do the following: expand our services for victims of violence that are essential to their physical, emotional, and psychological recovery. Launch new innovative services for young men who have experienced trauma to better equip them with coping skills. To scale our Pathways program, which is one of our most effective tools at helping young men to get on a better course. And last but not least, to evolve our person-based work began under the BBDC Emergency Operations Center into the People of Promise program, which was launched in April of 2022. This work is carried by frontline workers whose faces most of the public will never see. Every goal we help a young person to meet, every healing session held, every urgent service delivered that I will be sharing with you today is made possible because of them and their hard work, and I want to thank them. I would like to transition into a presentation on the impact of our programs and our plans for the remainder of this fiscal year. Following the presentation, my team and I are available for questions. All right, I want to start by providing a quick refresher on our agency's FY23 budget. As this chart illustrates, our FY23 budget stands at $35.2 million, which is a 17% increase over our FY22 budget. Our ARPA funds, shown in the light blue, account for nearly 50% of our budget. The majority of our agency budget, both local, federal, and intra-district funds, is dedicated to direct services for district residents. Our biggest investments continue to be in our Violence Intervention Initiative, which has a budget of nearly $16.9 million, and the Pathways program, which has a budget of $8 million. And our biggest new FY23 investment is the People of Promise program, which has a budget of $2.2 million. In FY22, Pathways program held 4 cohorts. The program enrolled 104 ambassadors, 83% of whom completed the classroom component. This fiscal year, the program is aiming to serve up to 200 ambassadors. The program's 12th cohort started in mid-January and will graduate in late March. Our program partners are critical to the success of the program, and I'd like to recognize Maurice Majid and his organization, Yay Me, for their continued excellence in facilitation, Mr. Jimmy Jenkins and Manpower DC for providing hands-on vocational training, Dr. Haling Williams and the Community Wellness Ventures team for delivering compassionate and accessible behavioral health services to ambassadors, and Easy Street, and the Creative Solutions for Youth team for exposing ambassadors to creative industries where they can use their voices to champion education and peace. In FY22 and FY23, we continued to expand our prevention work in schools, bringing ONSE leadership academies to 3 feeder middle schools connected to H.D. Woodson, Paul Public Charter, and Anacostia Senior High Schools. Our team started the 2022 through 23 school year alongside students at Kelly Miller, Paul Public Charter, and Kramer Middle Schools. The program model continues to focus on the students' ABCs, known as attendance, behavior, credits, and safety. This year, our teams are providing intensive support to nearly 140 students. And since the start of the school year, our OLA teams have held 157 group sessions and school-wide events and facilitated 81 student mediations. In FY22, our OLA team began working alongside One Common Unity's Peace Together team, which is a group of licensed clinicians and youth facilitators that provide therapeutic services to youth who have been affected by gun violence. Peace Together staff lead groups during lunch breaks for older students, which combine social emotional learning, leadership development, and mindfulness through art and music. This programmatic partnership continues to grow in strength, innovation, and mutual support. The Family and Survivor Support Team, commonly referred to as FSS, received 499 cases from the Metropolitan Police Department Victim Services Branch in FY22. 89% of these cases were adult cases and 11% were juvenile. The FSS team successfully completed 601 resource and service referrals for 61% of receptive cases. In FY23 to date, our team has received over 150 cases. FY22 budget enhancements have enabled us to hire 2 additional staff to support the increase in caseload and manage our service partnerships. Additionally, through Building Blocks DC strategic investments, the Office of Victim Services and Justice Grants issued grants to 3 community-based organizations to provide needed services to FSS clients, as well as to at-risk individuals and clients referred to from other violence intervention programs throughout the district. The focus of this program continues to be to provide support during the most difficult time in their lives and to connect survivors and next of kin to healing, empowering, and stabilizing services. There are numerous work streams and cross-agency efforts aimed at sharing critical information to identify and prevent gun violence. We believe reducing gun violence must be an interdisciplinary endeavor, and that's why last November, we launched a weekly community violence intervention or CVI coordination meeting. This weekly meeting includes all CVI and credible contact agencies and organizations, as well as other partners from the violence prevention and intervention ecosystem. During this meeting, ONSE provides a detailed review of shooting incidents from the prior 7 days. ONSE shares recent and upcoming Department of Correction releases. Attendees identify which partners are connected to people or places impacted by violence. They determine strategies and tactics to employ to address incidents, and they review progress from the prior week's meeting to ensure follow-through and accountability. The team also may conduct breakouts where smaller subsets of the group can share information and strategize around unique or emerging conflicts. Attendees include the ONSE Violence Intervention internal team and VI contractors, People of Promise staff, family and survivor support, our Pathways staff, the Office of the Attorney General's the internal VI team and contractors, DYRS Credible Messengers, Project Change, which is a hospital violence intervention program, Pretrial Services Agency, Court Social Services, the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, and our co-convener, the DC Peace Academy. As you know, Mayor Bowser announced the People of Promise Initiative in April of 2022. Under this program, district residents who have been identified as being at imminent risk of victimization or involvement in violent crime are being prioritized for accelerated service delivery and programming opportunities that can help them. Many of these individuals have a lengthy history with the criminal legal system, including prior juvenile supervision or prior adult incarceration or supervision. Because of their past involvement in community violence, many have survived a violent injury and suffered the resulting emotional trauma. The first group of people of promise that receive outreach services were identified through a gun violence problem analysis conducted by the National Institute for Criminal Justice Reform. This analysis was contracted by the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council in partnership with the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. However, in September, ONSE launched a second community referral stream. The launch of this second referral stream is in line with lessons learned from the University of Chicago's evaluation of the Ready Chicago program, which has multiple referral streams. The program is in the process of hiring and is on track to be fully staffed by the end of February. Currently, there are 189 people of promise engaged in the program, and you heard from several during the testimony. 136 are from the NICJR group, and 53 are from community referrals. Our dedicated Pathfinders and credible contacts have logged over 1,900 engagements and 240 service referrals for people of promise to date. When new funding came online, the Violence Intervention team asked some of our hardest to reach clients what services interested them. There was considerable consensus around entrepreneurship coaching, free studio time, and safe places to unpack trauma. So in FY22, we partnered with local organizations to bring each of those services to VI clients in the most accessible and authentic way possible. First, we launched trauma-informed care groups, which are neighborhood-based. Violence interrupters recruit participants who have an introductory session with clinicians at a location of their choosing. And then groups then continue to meet bi-weekly, and participants receive a financial incentive for attending. Trauma-informed care groups cover topics like mental health stigma, generational poverty, collective trauma, and managing anxiety. Next, we partner with local service providers to connect clients to one-on-one business coaching. Through this program, 20 young men obtained their LLCs and opened business bank accounts, and they currently meet all requirements to be eligible to receive funding. And finally, we partnered with 5 studios to provide free, safe studio times for clients interested in pursuing music. Nationally and locally, as Mr. Falwell so eloquently described, music scenes are marked by tragedy, and tragedy to the point where losing young artists have become the norm. We are not okay with that. And the aim of this initiative is to shift the dialogue from the promotion of violence toward a more positive local music landscape. In return for our support through these programs, we ask that aspiring artists and entrepreneurs do one thing. They use their voices and platforms to champion peace. To date, ONSE has provided over 75 at-risk clients from 17 priority community through these services, which are continuing in FY23. Last year, during our testimony, we shared the hopeful news that despite nationwide increases, we were starting to see local investments achieve results, and that many ONSE priority communities experience an overall decrease in gun homicides, ADWs with a gun, robberies with a gun, including a 16% decrease in shooting incidents compared to the same point in 2019, and an 18% decrease in gunshot victims compared to the same point in 2019. This powerful evidence of the impact of our work gave us great hope. I'm pleased to report that ONSE designated communities continue to experience this decrease last year. In 2022, ONSE VI areas had an overall 8% decrease in gun homicides and ADWs with a gun. In FY22, ONSE launched its mediation negotiation initiative that focused solely on resolving generational or long-standing conflicts between rival communities. I want to highlight the powerful impact of these peacemaking negotiations. Langdon Park and Saratoga have had an ongoing rivalry since 1999 that has resulted in numerous casualties. After a shooting incident in January of 2020, ONSE gathered key individuals to negotiate an immediate ceasefire. For the past 2 years, the ONSE Violence Intervention Program has held dozens of peace negotiations in the community and at the DC jail to formalize a mediation agreement. Langdon Park has had 0 homicides and shooting incidents in 2021 and just 1 shooting incident unrelated to this conflict in 2022. The Fort DuPont and Bennett Terrace communities in Ward 7 have had an ongoing rivalry for decades. It has evolved and have been escalated by music beefs, which was heavily amplified by social media in 2021. In response to the promotion of this beef or conflict on social media, ONSE Violence Intervention convened a meeting with credible contacts from both communities. A ceasefire was established on July 16, 2021, and is still in place to this day. As of last December, these 2 communities experienced a combined 46% reduction in ADWs with a gun and gun homicides compared to the same point in 2021, and a 66% reduction since the same point in 2020. Additionally, there have been no homicides in either community since ONSE and CURE launched their joint mediation. The data on this slide highlights some of our outcomes that contribute towards those city-wide reductions. In FY22, our violence intervention team and contractors negotiated 9 ceasefires and 2 mediations, facilitated restorative justice training for over 40 local CVI practitioners. We held over 325 community food distribution and community response team events, triaged 165 critical incidents, provided intensive support to over 200 of the district's highest risk individuals, and we held over 770 community events and small group activities. This concludes my presentation. Councilmember Pinto and my team and I are now available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Hunter. That was very helpful to see the overview and some of the effective services that are being delivered to residents throughout the year. So appreciate that. I want to just ask you about a few things that you mentioned there. One of them was the joint mediation with CURE. And I want to get into a little bit more later about some of the interagency collaboration, but can you elaborate on what that joint mediation has looked like and if those efforts are going to be expanding?
Sure, absolutely. I want to defer to Deputy McDaniel that can talk a bit more specifically about that mediation. I am hopeful that we'll see a significant increase in such mediations going forward. I referenced that Tuesday convening we have with credible contacts and violence interruption groups from across the city. There are OAG, some that are under the purview of the OAG, under the purview of the mayor, under the purview of some hospital-based, also some community-based organizations. It's routinely 50 to 60 members strong, and it's leading to even more collaboration. So I will defer to her to give the examples, but I'm optimistic with this new Tuesday convening, which is probably now maybe 2 to 3 months old, that we'll see even more collaboration. Deputy McDaniel.
Thank you, Director, for the opportunity, and thank you, Councilmember Pinto, for allowing me to speak today. As the Deputy Director explained, the mediation process is a very intricate one where we have to discuss peace negotiations between two communities. One of the things to highlight here is our need and focus to really invest in our violence interrupters and their abilities to negotiate peace. It is a highly scientific practice in other agencies or divisions. And so we want to continue to invest in our ability to do that, as some of the wars that we deal with have been going on for a very long time and require some form of incentive beyond just our relationships to bring about peace and healing for wars that have resulted in many, many casualties and have gone on for many years. In the 37th and Simple City communities, our original process where we started was to invite all partners who felt like they had relevance or influence in both communities. We brought all parties into one large focus group. And as we began to discuss and identify who had what strengths and who had what capacities, we were quickly able to identify what was needed. And it was an equal investment on both sides. Because Fort DuPont is a ONSE community and Benning was not, we recognized that there were unequal investments on both sides. So what we wanted to do was first create some equality between both groups and make sure that both sides were receiving some identical programming. The programming primarily centered around doing groups with the young men most active in the conflict, identifying some individual needs for those young men, pairing them with case management style partners that we have, and then identifying between those two groups, what would it take? What needs to happen in order to implement peace? We work primarily with our supports in this particular mediation. Some communities require us to work more directly with the active individuals, but in this case, we were lucky to have a lot of umbrella companies. Life Deeds Incorporated supported us in this effort. Father Factor supported us in this effort. Training Grounds and Together We Rise supported us in this effort, as well as a company known as Bridges. And what we had to bring those individuals to the table, figure out who was not being engaged that could support us, vet those individuals to make sure that they were staffed on a regular basis, and then make sure we invested in those activities that kept both sides engaged, as well as feeling invested in and feeling connected. This does require a lot of conversation, a lot of meetings, a lot of one-on-one discussions. We monitor social media closely. When we see things that could injure the ceasefire, we have these immediate conversations, bringing young men in. We do incentivize and reward the young men who are active in the conflict, and that has been the biggest effective component of the mediation process. We have to get dollars directly to the ground. A lot of our violence intervention models support staffing dollars, but it was super important that a lot of funding went to the ground to support programming dollars, putting incentivized monies and reward monies in the hands of those active individuals and serving as a deterrent.
Interesting. Thank you so much. That's really helpful to hear. And in terms of what happens following the mediation, how are you tracking the efficacy of those conversations to ensure that the violence continues to be prevented after the mediation is over?
Yes, ma'am. So we do track the number of activities that happen, the number of events, the number of groups, the topics for those groups so that we can monitor the consistency of messaging. We also track days without incidents. We do a daily census that represents the number of touches that happen in that community on a daily basis and what the basis of those touches were. If things are fine and we're in a preventative phase, we're more just checking to make sure things are okay. If tensions are heightened and we're more in an intervention space, that's more unique one-on-one meetings and conversations specifically around the war and not engaging and what it would require to maintain the peace. So it is definitely daily interactions, keeping daily tracking on what we do and as well as what has not happened. So a new measure that we're capturing on a daily basis is the number of incidents that were prevented today. And so we're able to track that as well. And that helps us keep a look at any activities on both sides, as well as keeping our eyes on social media and ShotSpotter to make sure there's been no activity.
Okay. And then in terms of the individuals that you're working with, is there other kind of short, medium, or long-term tracking to see if they are then subject to being victims of violence or perpetrating violence at a later date?
Yes, ma'am. So we enroll those key individuals into our People of Promise database. That's our Associate Director Satara Yell oversees. So we're making sure those individuals who some operate within a group dynamic and you can get a lot done in a group dynamic, but some do require very unique individual touches. So we enroll them in the People of Promise initiative, where they're tracked in QuickBase data system. And we keep a lot of very unique individual data points on those individuals. They develop action plans that set goals for them, both immediate, short-term, and that long-term bigger picture goals. And we work with them regularly to work towards those goals, doing assessments ourselves on a monthly basis to track progress and to see if the interventions are working or if we need to make adjustments.
Okay, thank you very much. And speaking to some of that data, because there's been a lot of interest, not just from the committee, but from the public about kind of what the effects of these interventions are and how we can measure them long-term for consideration of additional investments. The website has data from late 2021. Is there a plan to update the website with some new information similar to what you shared today with the presentation, but around the effectiveness of these interventions?
We are. We're working closely with the Deputy Mayor, the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice, and we hope to have those updates posted in short order.
Okay, thank you. Director Hunter, you talked about in your testimony some of the challenges associated with music and shifting the conversation around peace. And I'm just wondering how you have done that and what interventions in that space you have found to be most effective.
Sure. As a fan of hip hop or rap music, there's nothing inherently bad about the music as a genre, but what we've seen, which is troubling, it's troubling from a national perspective, is that negativity has sort of infiltrated like certain subgenres known as drill music, where violence is glorified to an extent that even those that are seasoned fans of rap just are not accustomed to, and that's been rewarded. And there's an old saying of what gets rewarded gets repeated. So it's still an important platform, and you have to find a way to incentivize a positive behavior. So one of those tools that Deputy McDaniel spoke about was the free studio time is a very valuable tool. We have through the 202 for Peace initiative, we have recorded songs that are now playing that are played on the radio on WKYS and I believe WPGC, promoting some of the positive messages to encourage the artists, the aspiring artists, that you can still have a platform, you can still make great music, but you can champion peace, and the artists have been receptive to that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for focusing on that. And I'm not sure if you heard my conversation with Mr. Falwell, but just was really moved that in that recent visit to the DC jail, 20 young men saying if there was one thing that we could have done differently, looking back on how we ended up here, it was all in the music. And so that story stays with me as we continue to work together to inspire that positive message of peace. So thank you very much. We are now going to turn to other colleagues who are here for 10-minute rounds. First, we will have Councilmember Henderson, who is an at-large council member and a member of this committee, followed by Councilmember Lewis George. Go ahead, Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you, Chairperson Pinto, and good afternoon, Director Hunter, and to your team. It's good to see you all again. I want to start with some questions about violence interrupters. In total, how many violence interrupters do we have that are active right now in the district?
Sure. Under the ONSE purview,
Yes.
We have approximately 70.
Okay. And I understand that these individuals are employed through CBOs who have grants with ONSE. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. We work with the Progressive Life Center, and we work to issue grants to the various organizations.
Okay. Once we do the granting, though, is there any central training that the ONSE office conducts for violence interrupters?
It is. In fact, Dana, if you could, Ms. McDaniel, rather, if you could, can you share a bit about what onboarding and what continuous support looks like?
Thank you, Director, and good afternoon, Councilmember Henderson. Some of the trainings that the violence interrupters undergo are as follows: case management and documentation. We also do a QuickBase data training where they learn QuickBase and how to enter data directly on their own. And we've made a cell phone friendly version so that they can do that real time in the field. We provide trauma informed care training where they teach techniques where our VIs help our clients process, manage, and appropriately respond to trauma. Restorative justice training where we're trained in leading peace circles and other healing activities for community. We do a lot of capacity building training and technical assistance. This primarily lies around some of the basic skill sets, as well as those violence interrupters who are interested who operate on the administrative side of violence interruption. So proper billing and proper documentation, proper submission of invoices is also an ongoing monthly training. We do a mediation ceasefire training, which is very specific and unique to teaching individuals how to identify and begin to broker peace negotiations between warring communities. We do a violence prevention and intervention training with our partner, Akil Bashir from California, which is centered around philosophies of violence prevention and intervention, as well as some basic skill sets that can be used and repeated. We're looking forward to their return this year, which will also include some shadowing in the field, where they're able to take some natural observations and give us some great feedback on strategies. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt. My little 10 minutes is going to go really quickly. What I do want to ask very specifically, though, is do we do any training on CPR, wound care, or delivery of Narcan?
Yes, we do a Stop the Bleed training as well as a Narcan training. We have not implemented Stop the Bleed or Narcan this year yet. We'll begin those starting in April and do a 6-month round into those summer months for those 2 trainings.
Okay, great. That's as we're sort of thinking about the trends that we're seeing in community, I want to make sure that our violence interrupters can, if they come upon a situation, do have the training in which they can respond to those particular incidents.
Yes,
one of the things I think we've talked about, or at least I believe this came up last year during performance oversight, was in terms of the wages for violence interrupters. And one of the things that had been raised was that for many of the VIs, they have to have multiple jobs because whatever the salary or wage that they're receiving from the CBO is not necessarily enough to sustain. And I know that this has been something that has not just come up in the district, it's come up in other cities who are using violence interruption and community intervention to stem public safety issues. What are we doing about that in DC?
Sure, Council Member. If I could, just to add a bit more to your question about the bleed stop, the training that we provide, we are partnering with Peace for DC to expand that training to other government employees that have similar duties, such as our roving leaders and others that play some role in violence intervention. And we're working now to offer those at some of our recreation centers. So just wanted to add that. So one of the things that I'm proud that we've done with our new model, working with the Progressive Life Center and community-based organizations, we do have target salary ranges. We do have, of course, there are factors such as experience and tenure that organizations should take into account when factoring in compensation. But we do have target compensation ranges to ensure that there is some parity between what someone in Congress Heights is making versus someone in Columbia Heights.
Right, but I'm not even sort of talking about disparities in terms of location, but I feel like if you're going to focus in on VI work, I need you not to also be tempted to do something else on the side that might negatively impact the impact that you have in the community from the VI standpoint, if that makes sense. And so ensuring that this could be a living wage opportunity as opposed to just a stopgap, I think is important.
Yeah, noted. I would agree with you. I think that those are broader issues that we face as a district, you know, that the mayor and the council are working hard on issues of affordability. This profession isn't exempt to that. They grapple with the same issues as a sanitation worker or a recreator or a teacher. So but I hear you and I agree with you.
Okay. Ms. McDaniel, you were speaking a little bit about listening into the exchange that you were having with Councilmember Pinto around some of the ceasefire negotiations and things like that. I'm curious to what extent we engage with individuals who are victims of non-fatal gunshots. Is that something that your office would reach out, right, in a way of trying to stem any sort of retaliation that may occur as a result of that? Are we engaging with those individuals? Are we connecting them with services that they may need? I'm trying to figure out who is the agency that is sort of responsible for that, right? Because you didn't die, great, but we also want to make sure that you don't die 2 weeks later because of something also brewing from this particular incident. So can you talk a little, I don't know who, but can someone talk a little bit about what happens in those situations?
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am,
sure.
council member. Oh, sorry, director, my apologies.
I would just add, no, I want you to chime in. I would just add that work is sort of personified through People of Promise. The People of Promise initiative, of course, there was a study that was commissioned by the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. And one of the factors they look at was prior victimization of violence. So we know that the profile of both a victim and a perpetrator are very similar. And in fact, many victims, many perpetrators are past victims of violence. If you look at that, that's one of the common threads amongst many of our People of Promise. And to date, you know, again, we're working with 156, and many of them have been victims of violence. Another stream is through our FSS program. We touched nearly, had last year almost over 400 cases, and we are constantly referring residents that have been victims of violence to services from that. Even now, the Pathways cohort that we have now, close to 25 young men. Many have been victims as well. So it's a regular part of our engagement and our offerings. And that's why the trauma-informed care, some of the other mental health supports are so important to provide the necessary services to address. It's not just the workforce development program, but we engage them in so many other ways.
Well, I think the program is super important. I guess I'm just trying to get down to who's responsible for making that connection, right? So after an incident takes place, is it MPD who's reaching out to you all to say, you know, here's Johnny's address. Johnny gets out of the hospital in approximately 4 days. Somebody needs to connect with Johnny.
Daily at 2 p.m., there's a coordinating call that includes MPD's victim services, the ONSE Family Survivor Support Team, also DCPS, their regular participants, and a handful of other agencies where they're discussing every incident from the past 24 hours. Additionally, we're in close communication with the hospital-based violence interrupters that are able to make those referrals as well. So there is a strong link where mostly everyone that has been a victim, they are receiving some sort of service. So that is the very first that is our formal process of engaging them.
Okay, great. I'm running out of time, so I'm gonna ask a short question. The Congress passed a appropriations package of about $250 million in federal dollars for community violence intervention efforts. This was following the Uvalde and Buffalo mass shootings. Did DC apply for any of those funds?
I know we currently receive, in fact, close to almost 50% of our budget is from federal funds through ARPA associated funding streams, and that has allowed us to grow our work from the depth and breadth of the services that we offer to expanding pathways to also engaging more communities. So that is a huge part of our funding for the past several fiscal years.
Okay, that's ARPA, but this is new. This came out last year.
Okay. I'll track down an answer for that pool specifically.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Pinto.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Henderson, and thank you for monitoring the clock. Appreciate that. Next, we will hear from Ward 4 Councilmember Janice Lewis-George.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairwoman Pinto, and good afternoon, Director Hunter. First, let me start by just saying thank you to your team. I want to just say that Satara, Dana, Marcus, I think are incredible public servants and have doing an amazing job. I have seen them on the ground. They stay late for meetings that I know are after work hours. Whenever we have had shootings in Ward 4, they have been on the ground. They have shown up to community meetings. They have connected with community members. They have truly provided support to our victims and their families. And I just want to say to you all, thank you. You've been doing excellent work. Please hang in there. We need you, so don't leave us. Okay. So I just want to say that starting out, because I really do appreciate the work that you all do and the care that you have for our community. It's very clear through your work. As you know, I love my ward, so I'm just going to start with some ward questions and just get some updates. First, want to talk about the Pathways program. As you know, I think Pathways is one of our most amazing programs, effective programs here in the district. And I know you have mentioned this in your testimony about the Pathways program. And I wanted to get a sense of, for Ward 4, how many people are currently enrolled with the program and right now, and how many of those are from Ward 4?
Sure. I'll pass this to Satar, if you could speak. I will say this, just for table setting context, we're very careful about community dynamics. Like typically you can't have two rival communities. So without sharing too much sensitive information about the composition of the team, the composition of the communities now, we won't put neighborhoods in conflict. We'll typically rotate. We'll typically rotate who's placed in cohorts.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Councilmember, for the question. We have at this time a cohort that started in mid-January. The cohort enrolled over 25 candidates. And I know for a fact that we have 3 individuals from Ward 4 and conversations ahead of this cohort with your office and with our Life Deeds team that is covering Wards 1 and 4 were about making sure we had some individuals who we had safety concerns about or were participating in either Pathways or other programming as soon as possible. So we're constantly looking, as the director said, at incidents that are unfolding. We're looking at our prior registrants, if there are individuals who are not able to join one cohort because of safety considerations, making sure that they are prioritized for a following cohort. And then, of course, the expansion of the Pathways program this fiscal year to increase to up to potentially 200 ambassadors is going to allow us to make sure that we are increasing enrollments across all 8 wards.
Okay, and so are there others from my ward who once engaged and would have been candidates for Pathways, but that we didn't have a capacity or room to enroll in this cohort?
We can take a look at our registration tracker and pull the exact numbers, and also send the total number of Ward 4 ambassadors that have participated since the launch of the program.
Okay. I appreciate that. And what is the status of securing a physical location for Pathways in Wards 4 or 5? I believe the current cohort is meeting physically in Ward 7 right now.
That's right. So we have identified and have a lease agreement for a second location in a Brooklyn community on 9th Street, 9th and Monroe, just across from the Brooklyn Metro Station. And we anticipate that this will be our anchor for some of our communities that are on the northern part of the city. And to that point, it will now allow us to do some different things, such as have neighborhoods that are in conflict. One can be here on 42nd Street in Ward 7, and then the other can be at the Brooklyn location simultaneously. We are working with DGS closely on this, and we're hoping to have access to that site by late summer of this year.
Okay. So you're looking at like hopefully a late summer for that transition.
That's correct.
You know, one of my goals this year is to get a community center type facility located on Kennedy Street, something that could address maybe a library, job training, housing needs in our Brightwood Park community. And so services or programs like Pathways are something that, you know, I was thinking about as something that could be beneficial in that and for that community. I have to ask about Ward 4 VI services. I know, well, first, I don't think, why did we lose Collaborative Solutions as a provider here in Ward 4?
They opted not to continue with the contract, with the grant rather, excuse me, in FY23. So we had placed a temporary contract or put into effect a temporary contract with Life Deeds. And it is a current open solicitation. There are multiple applicants. That solicitation for that grant closed on February 2nd or 3rd. And we anticipate, so we're going through the evaluation process now in close coordination with Progressive Life Center. And we expect for the new service provider to have a full-time contract beginning on April 1st.
Okay, so the full-time contract, so the solicitation is out, the selections are happening now?
Evaluation is happening now.
Evaluation is happening now. Okay.
That's right. But the applications were submitted on February 2nd, February 3rd. That was the deadline. So we have multiple applicants and they're being evaluated.
Okay. And then, and obviously, you know, I think it was unfortunate for us because violence intervention work is about relationships and trust. So it may be hard to foster relationships with the community when you don't have a stable community partner providing services. And so going forward, how are you working to make sure community partners remain in the community and provide quality services, and sort of what safeguards are in place to prevent additional lapses in service if a community partner doesn't want to renew their contract?
Sure. So if you look at the 5-year history of ONSE, we have been administering violence interruption grant contracts, now grants, for the past 4 years. We've only had one significant change, which was into this fiscal year. And we know continuity is really, really important. And in fact, even if you look at the transitions we made from last fiscal year to this fiscal year, many of these organizations function in what I would call a sub-grantee role. So for instance, Mr. Falwell isn't new to violence interruption. He worked closely with Together We Rise. With Training Grounds. Now he has his own organization. So we're dealing directly with practitioners. The same in Ward 5, Ward 5 Violence Prevention Network. Many of those were incumbents. And some of the incumbents that we're working with through this temporary contract through Life Deeds previously worked for CSC. So while the organizations have changed, some of the names are the same. And it's our hope that there'll be continuity going forward.
Okay. And what metrics should I look at or looking for in your oversight responses to measure the, I guess, impact of VI service providers in Ward 4? Are those metrics posted anywhere online or for more real-time monitoring?
Sure. So we'll post our yearly numbers for 2022. As you know, the books closed, not books. I don't want to say books. That might not be the right term, but the performance period ended on the 31st. So take some time to scrub that data. It's our commitment to work with J&PS to get that finalized and get that up. So I know at the end of the day, what people want to hear about is series of reduction in homicides and in violent crime. So that's going to be the major overarching number. And I think some of the things that I would encourage residents to sort of monitor are some of the inputs that we've been able to implement, such as the mediations, the ceasefires, such as the referrals to Pathways. And it's my hope that through that consistent work, we'll have results similar to what we're seeing with Simple City and 37th, what I talked about with Langdon Park and Brentwood, and even more recently, Brentwood and Edgewood, promising results just between first half of last year and the second half.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And the reason I'm asking for the data is because, you know, we all deal with the same thing. We all get the same comments, emails, Twitter, you know, everybody questioning, I think, the work of our VIs, which I know is offensive to you, but it's also offensive to me, and very much so. And so, you know, me, I'm like, let me get the data so I can show you and, you know, tell you the work that's being done. And so I think whenever you all get a chance, when you put those metrics up online, please just let us know, so that way we can have that within, you know, I can have that. So when I'm responding to people about the work that our VIs are doing, I can do so from a space of, this is the data we've collected and this is what we know.
I agree wholeheartedly. I agree.
I think, hold on, I got 18 seconds left, so I'm not going to get my last question in, but I do have another round, so I will yield my time back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Councilmember, if you just have one more question, feel free to go ahead.
No, I got to do one more round, so go ahead.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. All right, so Director, let's stay on violence interruption while we're on it, and go back to what the initiative looks like in each neighborhood. I understand that not everything can be shared for privacy concerns, but if you can share how many neighborhoods you're in and the cost of each program. One of the things that we heard from some of our public witnesses is a concern that there are a number of different neighborhoods being addressed, but there need to be more resources in those neighborhoods with the highest rates of violence. And so curious your philosophy on that with the current staffing numbers, how much each cost, and what that looks like in each neighborhood.
Sure. Currently, the ONSE office, we have 25 priority or designated communities, and we couple the grants with the community-based organizations and clusters, right? Because proximity is really, really important. So we have providers that are responsible for wards 1 and 4, right, together, and you have conflict between those two communities. Also, we have one service provider in Ward 5 that also extends into a bit of Ward 2, the 7th and O Kennedy Street, the 7th and O area near Kennedy Rec Center. Then also Ward 6 and 7 are coupled together, and then Ward 8 as well. So our model, typically for each provider, the grant is approximately $1.2 million for each provider, and they are able to hire 2 violence interrupters per community. And then also associated support staff, so about 70 total.
And can you break down that 1.2 million? So if they're able to hire 2 VIs per community, how much are those people being paid, and then how much is left over for other community investments that the deputy director was talking about?
Sure. So there are, to your point, there is funding rather for wages and then also programming. Deputy McDaniel, can you talk about some of the average wages and then also the non-wages, what types of activities those support?
Absolutely, Director. So our average cost per community for the traditional violence intervention model is about $200,000. Each of the providers actually are receiving $1.7 million each this community. They are expected to have 2 violence interrupters per community. One of those violence interrupters has to be full-time. There's not a lot of dollars left over for community-based programming. Each of them probably receive about anywhere from 15 to 20,000 per community to kind of do some community events and engagement. So what we've done is to not limit those dollars just to those vendors, is we'll be offering many grants to our communities so that different community partners have opportunities to implement community programming in addition to the violence interrupter dollars.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of the different needs of neighborhoods that you're working in, what kind of lessons have you learned over the last few years that have led to an adaptation of delivering services depending on what the neighborhood needs?
Sure. There are 2. One, when you hear about programs like Pathways, the majority of the participants are referrals from these 25 designated communities. And more recently, as we start to engage with some of the CURE service providers, they are now making referrals, and those referrals are now part of People of Promise and Pathways. So we know that having a program to make referrals is of the utmost importance, right? We call them tiers, and tiers tend to be individuals that have the greatest likelihood of being a perpetrator or a victim of violence. So being able to engage them through that is really, really important. And then I would say another best practice that we've learned that's a change from last fiscal year to this fiscal year is that we no longer have an age minimum. Before, contractually, it was 18 to 35 and it mirrored pathways. Now we recognize the need to work with youth even younger. So now, as we're seeing with youth violence, you may be engaging a young person that's 15, 16 years of age. And I think from that, the outgrowth of that has produced the ONSE Leadership Academy, right? The need to get into high schools and now middle schools. So I would definitely say as a best practice, we have to engage individuals at younger ages.
Okay, thank you. And I know we talked a little bit last round about updating the website with some of this data. Do we have a timeline that we can expect that will be live?
Yes, we're going to aim before the end of the month, before the end of February.
It's February 2020.
That's right.
Okay.
Mhm.
Exciting.
That's right.
We will look forward to seeing that. I do just want to note for speaking of data, the pre-hearing questions we'd hope to receive by Thursday, just to make sure that we can be as effective with our time. I know we did just receive those right before testimony today. And so just raising that for the future, if we can try to get those submitted in time so we can make sure we have a chance to review them in full before the hearing.
Noted, acknowledged. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So in terms of finding people to do this really important and challenging work, how have you gone about those types of outreach? And how have you dealt with the mental health supports that a lot of this work requires?
Sure. I'll start with the violence interruption community-based organizations. We are excited about the group of VICBOs that we're working with. We describe them as practitioners, folks that have close connections, such as Mr. Falwell. He is responsible for recruiting his staff. These are individuals that he has deep relationships with, that are stakeholders, that are known commodities within their communities. So we rely heavily on a good job of that. And Ms. McDaniel, if you could, can you speak more about what we do to support their mental health needs to ensure that they're well, that they can serve their communities?
Thank you, Director. Briefly speaking, we offer monthly self-care and wellness groups to our violence interrupters. We're actually, thanks to the suggestion of Program Manager Keisha Barnes, going to begin to mandate individual check-ins once per month as well for our violence interrupters to just assess trauma, to make sure that there's no needs for additional self-care or even possibly time off and away from the field to take mental health breaks if needed. So we have group sessions offered monthly, and we'll be moving to mandated individual check-ins offered monthly starting in the month of April.
Mandated monthly check-ins starting in April. Interesting. Okay. And just something of note, Director, when you talk about the people responsible for recruiting and bringing people in, have you found a tension between people with lived experience in neighborhoods that are experiencing violence, bringing in people who they know, and then there being a distrust in perhaps a rival crew or another neighborhood conflict that may be exacerbated by the expansion of the initial group in a neighborhood?
I have not. I've not seen a major conflict like any entity hiring. You know, there are many considerations, and you want to make sure you get the right people. Now, of course, not everyone makes the cut, but I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that come into fruition.
Okay. So I want to ask you about the floating teams for the violence interruption work. Can you explain how the floating program works and if there's any tension between that program and the basic concept behind VI, that they have the neighborhood knowledge and relationships that are key to the violence interruption program model? Where has the floating program worked so far, and what are those results like in addressing conflict in feuding communities?
Our floating team has been instrumental more recently in helping us to engage stakeholders or tiers in the Riggs neighborhood. Councilmember Henderson, we sort of referenced, we alluded to this a bit. Kennedy Street is in conflict with Riggs community or Riggs Park community. And having a floating team gives us the ability to go into a community that isn't a one's designated community, meaning contractually we aren't servicing. So it's been helpful. We've utilized them in a number of neighborhoods because, of course, the conflicts are so fluid. Conflict is so, there are hundreds of neighborhoods in the district. You're never going to have like a presence in each one. You need to have the ability with folks that have transferable skills where they can go into communities. They maybe have citywide reputations, right? Or maybe they have a certain skill set that allows them to go in and see eye to eye with the community stakeholder and it can establish inroads on behalf of ONSE. Can you speak to Deputy McDaniel, some of the other communities in which our floating team have been helpful in helping us to establish inroads?
Yes, sir. I recognize the time, so I'll be quick. Council member, if there are other questions, let us know. Riggs Park, to complement our work with Kennedy Street. We're in some quarters to complement our work in the Shaw community. Wellington Park to complement some Ward 8 multi-layered rivalries there, and as well as South Capitol Street. The floating team also comes in and to support us in communities where we may already exist, and they may provide additional supports. Maybe there have been recent incidents and there's a need for all hands on deck. So they also layer up and supplement as well.
Got it. Okay, thank you so much. We'll maybe circle back with you next round on that, Deputy Director. All right, next we will have Councilmember Henderson for another 10-minute round.
Thank you. Director, last year during the performance oversight hearing, we talked a little bit about the ONSE Leadership Academy. And at the time, I think you all said that the plan was to expand into the feeder middle schools for Anacostia Woodson and I believe Paul?
That's right.
Did that happen and how is it going?
It happened. It's done. I'm proud to report. We're in 6 schools now. We're engaging close to 140 students, so we've nearly doubled the amount of students that we've served. And so far, we've received encouraging results. The mayor had a citywide meeting with principals, and we heard, I got a chance to engage most recently those principals there for Kramer and Kelly Miller. So I would say it's a success.
Great. So is this the ideal expansion model? The going with the feeders for the high schools that you've all dealt with? And I mean, I hate to say, like, should we be talking to some of the elementary school kids, because some of this is starting to happen younger and younger. What are your thoughts on that?
I think definitely we see a need to start earlier, and middle school was identified as the next logical step in those feeder schools. We think that OLA is poised for expansion, and we're having those conversations now with the city administrator and the mayor's office about what that could look like.
Okay. Ms. McDaniel, I saw you raise your.
Sorry, thinking aloud. We also want to add that we've been in connection with DCPS's school culture division, and that we will develop a curriculum that hopefully could be implemented in elementary schools around crew culture and diverting our youth away from crew culture.
Yes, because I've seen some of these photos that they post on the social, and I'm like, you look 9. But you have a crew. I'm confused, as opposed to just like the people that you hang out with at the playground. What kinds of other, practical supports do you think that our outreach specialists should be providing to youth? So one of the things that comes to mind for me, and this is probably a component of the Leadership Academy, but I want to confirm, is around anger management training. How do we resolve conflict without making it violent? How do we deal with if something doesn't go your way? How do you resolve, all of those things? And it's, I have toddlers and I'm already having to start that, like, okay, it's time to share. And I just feel like it's a muscle that we have to continue to practice with our young people. And for some of them, they need additional touch points in terms of what are some strategies you can deal with, as opposed to, deciding to pick up a gun.
No, without question. In fact, we agree with you. One of the things that we're proud of with this expansion is our partnership with One Common Unity to provide certain services. Ms. Yale, can you talk about what those entail and the frequency of them?
Absolutely. Thank you, council member. As the director mentioned, in FY22, we began a partnership with One Common Unity. They received a grant under the BBDC strategic investments that is issued by OVSJG, but most of the referrals that they're receiving for services under that grant come from our office. Their work under that grant is really split into two primary parts. One is their collaboration with the OLA team. So their clinicians and their staff are leading therapeutic activities in all 6 of our ONSE Leadership Academy schools on a weekly basis. And then they are also available for responsive events. So when we have incidents that impact juveniles, that impact a school community, they have a team that's on call to respond and provide support to school communities. So they have led what they call a 4 Spaces healing event at nearly a dozen schools since the beginning of this school year. They've done those events at elementary, middle, and high schools. The 4 Spaces event that they lead can be for a classroom, it can be school-wide, it can be grade-wide. And that is really about just kind of providing options to youth in the immediate aftermath of an event. There's a corner where youth do not need to talk about the event at all if they want a diversion or a distraction. There is a corner where clinicians are present to speak to youth in a group setting or one-on-one.
And how is it, how is recruitment going for these, right? Because obviously, well, not obviously, but if I put my chair of the committee on health hat on, I know that the search for clinicians is a scrappy one where we certainly don't have enough people to meet the need. And so I'm curious how that is going. But I guess that is more One Common Unity's issue versus the ONSE office because you are contracting with them.
It is, however, I know that they are fully staffed under the grant right now and they continue to have capacity. We haven't reached a point where we've had to shut down referrals. Their services, they also offer one-on-one counseling services, and our family and survivor support team has been the largest kind of referring party. They've referred over 41 youth since the grant began for individual counseling. And the beauty of One Common Unity's team is that they have art therapists, they have drama therapists, dance therapists, and they're also able to service a wide range of youth. So they've worked with youth as young as 4 and as old as 24, emerging adults.
Last week, there was a ProPublica article that was talking about the impact of violence intervention programs in communities. I'm not sure if you saw it. It didn't necessarily focus on DC. They spent a lot of time focused on Baltimore and Chicago, but it talks about one of the models, director, that you spoke about in your presentation, the READY model. And one of the things that the article sort of discusses is that the most violent interruption models were developed in the 90s and the early 2000s, and haven't necessarily been updated to sort of meet the present day challenges of now you have an introduction of social media and what that component sort of looks like. When you all are evaluating CBO partners who are coming to the table or the model that you are taking, how are you looking to ensure that it's up to date, if you will?
Yes, that's a great question. I can't state it any more eloquently than Mr. Dwayne Falwell, who was one of the public witnesses and also one of our CBO partners. He indicated how we adopted that READY model in a couple of ways. Like, so we know that DC has we don't have formal gangs, we have crews, right? So that is something that we adopted specific, that we tweaked to fit DC sort of crew culture versus organized gangs. But there were some things from the READY model that we have adopted, such as community referrals for people to promise, right? So of course, there was a study that was conducted and certain individuals were identified based on certain risk factors, but we also knew that in addition to that, you need a community referral. So we were able to do that as well. And even Mr. Falwell talked about this sort of now new social currency where maybe 30 years ago, it was about money or about territory or turf. But now what you see is a focus on maybe likes or social media clout, attention, comments, buzz that you can build that's associated with a lot of these neighborhood conflicts with music. So those are just some of the variables that we've been thinking about as we look at our model. And the ONSE model is a person-based model, which is something that we strongly believe in.
Yeah, and when we think about what's happening in terms of juvenile activity in the district, and one of the things that I think about is, again, Chief Conti's most recent presentation, he says that for a lot of the youth that they're encountering, the first interaction that they're having with the police, it's usually involving a gun now, as opposed to some small petty theft, situation. And so things have sort of escalated. And one of the things I also was thinking about too was that for a lot of our young people who are involved in these crews, et cetera, they've never had an opportunity to just be kids, right? Just to do the things that kids at 9 and 10 are supposed to do, hanging out with your friends, riding bikes, pick up basketball games, those kinds of things. And that sometimes the best thing for you might actually be a little break from the community, whether it be, maybe you should go to summer camp, not in the District of Columbia. What are those conversations? I mean, obviously you have two hats, right? So the ONSE office and DPR, so you can kind of make those moves, but are those kind of collaboration things happening in a way that's not punitive, but it's just to say, go be a kid for the summer?
Yes. You hit the nail on the head. We just this past week launched Recreation for All Community grants, and from DPR. I'm speaking with my DPR hat on now. And the goal is to empower recreators across the district with the focus on communities that have barriers to access, sometimes because of neighborhood conflict. And then sometimes those barriers to access may include financial considerations of not being able to participate in sports or travel. And even beyond athletics, just recreation as a whole. So we expect to engage 10,000 additional youth beyond what we serve the remainder of this fiscal year alone through these grants. And it'll include, like, I'll give you a case in point. There's a recent tragedy of a young man that was lost, and I talked to this football coach, a volunteer football coach, and the volunteer coach said, if I want to have the capacity, there's still 25 other young men that were his teammates. I know it's not football season. I want to engage them outside of this. I want to be able to take them on field trips. I want to take them outside of the community. We want to go camping. We want trauma-informed care. So now this grant will provide a pathway for us to be able to do more of that. I absolutely think that you are right. Our kids deserve opportunities to be kids. I made this appeal, and the mayor was very receptive. I said, hey, I recognize the value in tutoring and some of the other academic components, but we need opportunities for kids to be kids and have more access to recreation, even beyond what we provide as an agency, because we're not the sole provider. So that's something that launched just last week. And especially we're gearing up for these warmer weather months of summer. I think it'll be something that'll be tangible that the council and the public will be able to see throughout the warmer weather months.
Okay, we'll follow up on that during budget season as well. Thank you, Councilmember Pinto. Sorry, went over. Sorry, Councilmember Lewis George.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember. Next, we have another round from Councilmember Janice Lewis George.
Thank you. Director, I want to ask, how many Latinx, Latino VIs do we have?
Deputy McDaniel, can you speak to that, please?
Thank you. We do have two fully Spanish-speaking staff on board. One of them is of Latino descent. The other one is an African-American male.
Okay. So, and I think Councilmember Henderson said it. So we have, out of our 70, we only have 2 currently that are Spanish-speaking. And so I think this is an area where we're going to have to do some recruitment. Particularly, as you know, in Ward 4, we do have gangs that are Latino-based gangs, 18th Street and MS-13, that do operate in our Brightwood community and in our Columbia Heights Ward 1 community. And so in dealing with the conflict that we see there and the gun violence stemming from there, we need more Latinx, Latino VIs to be able to contribute to our community in that way. And so I am essentially highlighting the issue and also making the ask that we do some more recruitment to get some more Latinx and Latino VIs to service our Ward 4 and Ward 1 community, where we have a concentration of that gang violence that does happen, that does end up in shootings in our communities.
I agree, council member. And with the open solicitation now for wards 1 and 4, it's something that we'll closely look at and evaluating and then making an award. And then from the get-go, establishing that as a priority.
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Councilmember, may I correct my testimony? Those 2 staff are one's internal staff, not 2 violence interrupters. I stand corrected.
Okay. So we gotta get some recruitment there. I appreciate that, that transparency. But so we're gonna have to get some recruitment going there. Maybe partnering with the LAYC, our Office of Latino, the Mayor's Office of Latino Affairs, and seeing what we can do to make some strides in that area. And then as it relates to that, you all have been doing such a great job at Paul Charter School. And when you do a great job, what people ask you to do, more of it. So I am interested in and I know you've just expanded, so you're like, Councilmember, please stop. But I'm interested in one's leadership programming for McFarland Middle School, and that in the Petworth area. And in that area specifically, we do get recruitment of young people into some of the Latin-based gangs like MS-13 and 18th Street. And so I think the work that you've done with Paul Charter School has been great. And so I am putting out there that I would like to see if McFarland Middle School can be considered for the program. And then I'm asking the question, taking out my specific Ward 4 ask, how many, what would it take to increase those numbers, basically staffing, budget, and school cooperation? What would it take to bring, to start up another leadership academy at a school?
We are happy to have further discussions with you, council member, along with the executive on what that could look like. Okay,
thank you. I appreciate that. Very side question, it's random here, but the mayor allocated millions of ARPA dollars for public safety streetscaping. I don't know if your office is a part of determining priority safety streetscape locations. But Petworth is one of the areas that I know we have worked with our VIs, both the Cure side of VIs and the ONSE Office of VIs. As you know, we've had a handful of shootings over the past year at Petworth Metro, and the Metro is particularly vulnerable to drive-by shootings because of the busy intersection and abundance of space for people to stand or sitting and unfortunately become potential targets. So I just wanted to see if you all are involved in this determining priority safety streetscape locations. And if so, is Petworth on your list?
I am unfamiliar with this initiative, but I'll have to look into that and get back to you.
Okay. It was like 25 million for public safety streetscapes in this current year budget that's supposed to be there. So I was trying to get Petworth as one of those improvements. So if you could look into it, that would be wonderful.
Yes, council member, will do.
Great, thank you. I want to ask about collaboration with our CURE programs. Now, I've seen the collaboration myself on the ground and witness the teams working together, but I wanted to just get on the record. If a shooting occurs in an area that involves both CURE and the ONSE office, walk me through the communication and action that is taken by your office to jointly respond and prevent any retaliation.
Yes, I am really excited about those Tuesday community violence intervention coordination meetings that I referenced. They are, again, the participants range between 50 and 60 participants from OAG, VI groups, ONSE, hospital-based violence interrupters, also some community-based organizations like DC Peace Academy. And as a part of that meeting every week, we go over violent incidents from the previous 7 days. Also, we review videos. We review some of the rap videos that have been released on various social media platforms to kind of break down what we're hearing and what we're seeing. And then we have small breakouts where we may have, like, I'll give you an example. We had one in which you had Cure, the narco organization, which is a Cure organization in Trinidad, having a small breakout with the ONSE violence interruption group, War 5 Violence Prevention Network, talking about strategies to mediate conflicts between those two communities. So that's happening on a weekly basis. It's real, it's tangible, it's leading to results. Also with this closer collaboration, now some of the Cure CBOs are now making referrals for pathways and some of our programs like People of Promise. So that I think has been a game changer, and it's something that has been most recent since I think the initial meeting was maybe September, October, and now it's really picking up steam. It's a weekly convening, and it's something I think will pay huge dividends going forward.
Okay. And who does the community turn to for info as far as that overlap goes?
So typically what will happen is communities, ANC stakeholders, they'll reach out to who they have relationships with, right? So, you know, it may be Reverend Judy, Councilmember Lewis George, and Dana simultaneously.
Okay.
So that still is going to happen. I think that as these relationships mature, you'll see even more collaboration where folks know who's on first for what. I think we're getting to that point. I do think that that'll be the outgrowth of these Tuesday convenings. Okay.
And I was really happy to hear about the weekly CVI coordination meetings and support information. Did you all, I noticed MPD was not included. Is that purposeful, just to not have MPD in the room there, and you all just transfer that information over to MPD? Because the reality is, you all actually, your people actually have the more on the ground information and personal relationships and understand DC and our communities and neighborhoods and crews and all of that a little bit better. And I think some of the newer officers don't have the base of knowledge that you all have. So I'm just trying to make sure that there is some cultural, I guess, information being transferred to MPD and understanding sort of the neighborhoods that they're working in and some of that information that you all hold that they may not hold.
Understood. MPD is not a part of this meeting, but they do provide the information that we review, such as the incidents from the previous 7 days. They've been very helpful in getting us information to get to our partners. And we are actively exploring other ways to work with MPD on the areas that you mentioned.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. And then about our schools, I know we have our safe passage teams and our DBH teams. How do you all work with this safe passage teams and DBH as well as community partners?
Sure. So it looks different in every community. I'll give an example. Like in Ward 5 at Brooklyn Middle, we have a outstanding violence intervention community-based organization, the Ward 5 Violence Prevention Network, and their VIs have formed relationships with the principal. Their Principal Richardson at Brooklyn Middle. They're in regular communication. They are they know the safe passage workers. In fact, we have an active roving leader there that assists with safe passage. So that's just an idea of collaboration. Now our goal is to formalize it. Again, one of the things I mentioned, I think was in response to might have been a question from Councilmember Pinto and Henderson, but I indicated that now contractually, the language in an actual grant agreement now allows them, prior to this fiscal year, it was 18 to 35. Now contractually, they can work with you. There is no age minimum. So as they can formally now engage younger youth, so we think that there'll be even more collaboration and more of a presence in the school. And we're working with the Deputy Mayor for Education, the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety, and the charters in public schools on what that should look like. Of course, there are a lot of considerations when you have adults in schools that are not DCPS employees. So we're working through that.
Okay. And Chairwoman Pinto, can I ask one more question? Because then I have to leave and I'm out and I have to head over to DSLBD. Because because
Sure,
Director Phil has
no
started.
problem. Go ahead.
My last question is around housing, and I know this has come up with us a lot because we have so many families in Ward 4. Sometimes people want placements. I know the ONSE office has funds available, or at least works with our victim services and housing agencies to provide housing relocation for victims of gun violence. I just wanted to understand, what are those funds? Like, how do you have, is there a pot of funding that you all have to relocate individuals, or is the money within another agency and you sort of just coordinate with that agency particularly? And sort of what's the process for approving someone for housing assistance or housing transfer?
Sure, Ms. Yale, can you take that?
Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Councilmember. So housing has been a pain point in this CVI space for a long time. And last year, we were really pleased to have a grant started that provides temporary emergency safe housing in hotels for individuals who have been impacted by gun violence. Most referrals come from our family and survivor support team. However, that program was open to other partners in the CVI space. So for example, our HVIP providers made referrals for individuals who had recently survived violent injuries. But that is temporary, and it is on an emergency basis only in those hotels. We know that we need a whole kind of housing services continuum here. We need to explore what else is needed beyond that temporary emergency safe housing. So that was a really positive first step, something that we had been looking for, and that grant continues. Individuals are provided kind of light housing coordination assistance. However, we are not able to promise or guarantee any sort of relocation underneath that program or any sort of permanent supportive housing or permanent options. One of the things we are really excited about that we will be launching this year is a new housing service, kind of as we're building out this continuum. So ONSE has been working closely with the lab at DC. The lab at DC worked closely with DHS on the launch of their flexible rent subsidy program.
Okay.
And that program is, I believe, reaching its kind of 5th year. Their first cohort of individuals to receive assistance is going to be graduating this March. So we've taken a look at that housing model and at also rapid rehousing. And we found components of both of those models that we think would benefit our clients. So we're in the process of working with the lab to design a flexible rent subsidy program that both People of Promise and Pathways alum will be able to take advantage of. The program will provide 3 to 5 years of rental assistance, and it will also provide light support with leasing up and financial coaching. We will definitely notify all stakeholders of when the solicitation goes out, and we're looking for a provider to administer that program. But that program, we think, will be a game changer in providing long-term stability to clients who have been experiencing housing insecurity for a long time. We've found a lot of ONSE clients are experiencing housing insecurity, and they may be unwilling or unable to access housing services through the traditional continuum because of safety issues. So we know we need to kind of carve out specialized services for our client population.
Okay. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And Councilmember Chairwoman Pinto, that's an area that I don't know if you all can do some work on within the committee, because it comes up a lot. We try to do, we have temporary relocation for victims of gun violence sometimes, but then once the hotel is out, they have to go back to wherever they were, and we don't have any sort of long-term or short-term places. So hopefully that's something you all can explore with ONSE to try to find a solution that can be helpful. And thank you for your time.
Got it. Thank you so much. Thank you for raising that issue, and thanks for joining the hearing today, Councilmember. So Deputy Director, I want to go back. We were talking about some of the floating teams last round, and I want to dig into a little bit of the work going on at Shaw, in Shaw, and how that floating team has been operating and some of the improvements, if any, that you've seen in the area.
Sorry, thank you for that. So the Shaw community is currently being overseen by our Ward 5 network team. We selected that team to maintain the Shaw community because they have several communities right on the Rhode Island Avenue Strip. And so adding Shaw would be easy for that team to be able to reach the remote location and support them with supplemental programming. So we've been doing well in Shaw under the Ward 5 network. They've employed 2 violence interrupters there who are rooted in the community. We've done focus groups with those young men. We've done restorative justice groups, a lot of intentional outings. We are working with other civic associations in the Shaw community so that we can have a regular meeting space. They have done very well in the community with working with us to help us identify those spaces so that we can hold weekly groups for the Shaw community. The floating team's best work is actually happening with the rivals of the Shaw community. So another thing we've learned is there's the true benefit comes if we're able to engage a community and its rival. We were engaging Shaw and we learned that as the rival emerged with some transparency, the floating team was deployed to Sursum Quarters to help us begin some joint meetings between those two groups. Since our floating team has been in Sursum Quarters, we have not seen the same level of violence between those two communities as we have previously saw. And so we're working to balance programming to make sure Sursum has some investments and continue to invest in the young people in Shaw. They will be enrolled in our trauma-informed care regular rotating groups in the coming months. So we're hoping to see, be able to track some progress directly from engaging in that service and decreases in incidents.
Okay, thank you so much. And Director Hunter, also with both of your hats on, something we've discussed before, and I'll just reflag here, is my desire to make sure we have a recording studio in the Kennedy Rec Center as an option for our young people. So hope to work with you all on making that happen this year.
Yes,
Absolutely.
that is in plans as well. Thanks for the reminder.
So I'll just ask there, because we're also in the middle of budget season, does that mean that there's not additional funding required for that? It's in plan to be placed? Okay.
That's right. That's right. We are looking through the Mayor's Recreation for All budget. We have some discretionary funds. We've been building new converting rooms into esports studios. And we're also looking at some esports rooms, or gaming rooms rather, but we're also looking at studios. So we think we have enough to be able to do both. And Kennedy is 1A, Brentwood is 1B, New York Avenue is 1C. So those are all sites that we're looking at for regular studio presence, because we recognize how popular that is. And Deputy McDaniel has been a great resource for what that can look like, because we actually constructed one at Johnson Middle School. So we have the know-how. She has the quotes. We know exactly what it takes to get it done. So yes, I know that's a priority of yours, and I want to find a way to make Kennedy happen this fiscal year with existing money.
Love it. Love to hear it. Thank you all so much. Okay, so moving on to pathways. We talked a little bit about it at the outset, the focus to help at-risk individuals transition into permanent employment through a 9-month training program and subsidized employment program. Can you explain, Director, how ONSE identifies and selects pathways ambassadors?
Sure. So the referrals have primarily, or historically, have been from what we call what are known as tiers. From our priority communities. So, as you know, we've explained each community, you have 2 violence interrupters that are there on the ground. They are our largest source of referrals, but also we work closely with CSOSA. CSOSA is able to make referrals as well. And then more recently, within the past 6 months, some non-ONSE VI groups such as CURE, I indicated, like NARC has been a source for referrals, and Father Factor and a few others are now able, through this weekly convening, to identify individuals that they think would be best served through pathways.
Okay, great. And then once those identifications have been made, can you walk me through the process of convincing somebody to participate, and what's been effective and what you've learned that maybe is not the best strategy?
Sure. So one of the things we look at, once we get a list of referrals at any given point, any given cohort, there are probably 50 or 60 eligible folks, right? But we take into account neighborhood conflicts, right? So if you have neighborhood A in conflict with B, it wouldn't be a good idea to have them and they're there at the same time. But also we look at overall representation. You may have 6 or 7 distinct communities that are represented in a given cohort, and you don't want one to be too much, want one to be more prevalent than the others. Then also we look at the dynamics between our our referrals from our violence interrupters and also referrals from CSOSA, because those that are under formal court supervision bring a different element compared to those that are referrals from the community, right? So we're constantly looking at those dynamics. So what we do after that, we do issue invitations, and we do, of course, interviews to see if it's a good fit, to see if they're ready. And then we have a 2-week orientation, and that 2-week orientation is to get a sense before the program officially begins, to get a sense if this is a good fit, to see if they're ready to commit to the rigor of having to show up at 9:30 here at the ONSE office, stay for a full day, participate in the classroom style training that we have, and engage with the various partners that we have in facilitating pathways. So that's just a bit about what from 0 to sort of day 1 looks like.
Okay, and do you track all of that data of the number of people you reached out to, which conversations worked, where they are now?
Exactly, because we've had some instances where, because of community dynamics, we could not serve a cohort a person this time, and we've even had folks, unfortunately, that have experienced some personal challenges, that sometimes victimization that prevented them from being a part of that cohort, and their extended invitations to future cohorts. And again, what I'm really excited about is opening up our second location in Brooklyn on 9th Street. That'll allow us to do even more. This past fiscal year, we served 120, 130 ambassadors. With this second location, we expect to serve close to 200 on an annual basis.
Wow. That's great. Thank you. And I'm thinking particularly of individuals who are involved with a crew and the sense of identity that they may feel from that involvement. How are you persuading people to kind of join a different type of group with pathways and keep them from backsliding once the program is complete?
Sure. Satara, Dana, would you all like to take that?
I will chime in, council members, to say that one of the things we've been thinking about is the process of change, or that journey can be lonely. There's a lot of change, and it can kind of disrupt what you're used to, get you out of your comfort zone. And so one of the tacks we've been taking within Pathways, but also in our VI programming and our People of Promise programming, is identifying individuals who are interested in the program, and then identifying those around them who might also be interested, and bringing them into the fold, so that the journey is not so lonely, and so that they have a support system, a natural built-in support system while they are going through that programming. If you take our Pathways program, for example, that might just mean, instead of onesie twosies, a number of individuals from a couple dozen neighborhoods, you have several neighborhoods that are able to safely participate in the programming together, largely represented in one cohort. And that can help from everything from carpooling, to the program, to when you're leaving the program over the weekends, check-ins with one another. If one individual in that friend group is kind of sliding backwards, there are others who can check in with them and pull them back in. And it also means that our staff have other points of contact. If someone disengages, there are natural resources or connections that we can leverage to figure out how to support that individual. We took that same approach with our DPW recruitment for our cohort that started at DPW in November. We really tried to focus on a couple neighborhoods, and particularly neighborhoods that had been involved in escalating conflicts. And those participants are a huge internal support system for one another.
Interesting. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And is that kind of just dependent on the cohort and how you've been able to expand, or do you have data around like how often that strategy has been utilized in the recent cohorts?
So we track for all cohorts, the referring party, not just the organization, but the individual that made that referral, as well as the ward and neighborhood that participant is from. So we're able to see trends like that. And as we've started to employ that tactic more, it's something we'll be looking at more closely. And again, as the director said, having a second location is going to allow us to scale that.
Okay. One of the things that I was speaking earlier this morning with the HSEMA director about, was there alert protocol where a resident can reach out to HSEMA to say this person either seems to be a threat to the community or may be at risk, or both, and need some additional services, and how some residents may be much more interested in pursuing that type of outreach than reporting someone to the police, which may be a more drastic measure. And so wondering if you have been, or how the coordination has been between ONSE and HSEMA from your perspective, and what the type of outreach and referral is from community members directly to ONSE.
We have in the past received referrals from HSEMA, and we're working closely with the new Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice to strengthen that protocol and to make some adjustments to that. So definitely want to defer to Deputy Mayor Pia on our vision for that. But we have received referrals, and we are working to strengthen that.
Okay, and how generally do your referrals come in? Like, is there a process by which a community member otherwise unaffiliated with ONSE could make a referral?
Well, we have received referrals directly from HSEMA. So ones that HSEMA have collected, and they'll refer to ONSE.
But on your own, have you been able, or is there a process to receive a referral directly from the community or from a school?
So for our People of Promise program, we began with that group from the NICJR analysis, but last fall we opened up a community referral stream, and the community referral stream is right now open to credible contacts that are in the work. So to Cure Violence Interrupters, to ONSE Violence Interrupters, we've received some referrals there from HVIP providers as well, where they flag, we just got a case and this is the third incidence of victimization. So that referral stream is there are a number of partners involved, basically all of the partners that are at our CVI meeting each week on Tuesdays. And there's also a lot of those referrals kind of came through natural existing connections. So let's say we had a person of promise that we had originally been working with, and then a violence interrupter came to us and said, they have a close friend or they have a sibling who's at an equal level of risk. I'd like to refer them. And now we can work with either that family or that group of young people more holistically.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
And I would say with regard to OLA, there's joint discussion between our ONSE outreach workers that are present in schools and the school administration about the appropriate students to work within that school-based setting. And that's done through collaboration and conversation. It's not the school saying, hey, these are 20, and it's not one saying, we only want to work with these 20. There's joint discussion and there's mutual agreement on the students in which we should work with.
Okay, thank you so much. And that's something that I've been pushing on the last couple of years to, even if the names of the individuals cannot be shared, to better understand the protocol of the information sharing for at-risk individuals between all of those agencies, and something I've been unable to get a clear answer from DCPS or the Deputy Mayor for Education around. And so that's something I'm looking forward to working with you all and Deputy Mayor Pai on as well as we move forward. So how many cohorts have gone through the Pathways program?
All right, so we're on our 12th. So we've had 11 successful cohorts to be completed, and we're on our 12th, and the 12th will conclude in March.
Okay, and how many individuals in each or around?
So it's ranged between 20 and 30 primarily for each cohort. And I think overall, I think we're at nearly 240 graduates throughout the lifespan of the 12 cohorts, of the 11 cohorts.
Okay, and of those 240 graduates, how are we measuring success? What are you defining as success, and what are those numbers?
A few measurements we're closely looking at. One is recidivism, of course, and of course, victimization of violence is another. But also we're looking at stable housing, unsubsidized employment, and credential attainment. Now we are strengthening our ability to track that information through the creation of a database. I would Ms. Hill, I don't think we're at a point where we have the total picture of what those measurements look like throughout the 11 cohorts, but we are starting with our current cohorts now, at least 10, 11, and 12, to better track that information. So to be able to go back and similar to how we report those top line figures about community violence on our website, we want to be able to also have robust reporting to say, hey, of the 260 graduates, this is our recidivism rate, this many have achieved stable housing, this many are unsubsidized employment, et cetera.
Okay, and can you share kind of even on a rounded basis what some of those numbers are?
Ms. Yale?
Sure. So one of the things we look at for the Pathways program, of course, is after enrollment, what percentage of individuals graduate from the classroom component, the very first step. We've averaged around 80% there. We've had a pretty high retention rate. The next step is looking at the percentage of participants that move into subsidized employment through our partnership with Department of Employment Services. That percentage has ranged by cohort. We have always been over the 50% mark, which is a mark that we look at for programs that serve similar populations. One thing to note there, and kind of the nuance that the director was speaking to, is that not all of our Pathways alum, once they complete the classroom component, are interested in securing subsidized employment. Sometimes, and in a lot of cases, because of other barriers to employment or because of their own individual passions, they're looking towards entrepreneurship or non-traditional employment opportunities. And so entrepreneurship coaching is something that's embedded within the program. And we partner with DSLBD on connecting those participants to relevant services there. In terms of FY22, we had 4 cohorts go through the program. We hit that kind of 80% mark for graduation from the classroom component, and subsidized employment, about 60% of our participants moved into that step. And then because those cohorts are quite recent, not all of the cohorts have completed their 6 months phase there, but at this point in time, nearly 19 of those participants have secured permanent unsubsidized employment. One of the things we want to look at—
I'm sorry, 2019?
19 participants from 2022 or from FY22 have secured permanent unsubsidized employment. But of course,
and is
a
that
good person. What's that?
I'm sorry, is that 19 out of the 240?
No, sorry, that's not, I'm speaking to FY22 numbers. So that's 19 out of the 83 that graduated from the cohort, but 2 of those cohorts are still in their subsidized phase. So they've not yet moved into the phase where they're pursuing permanent unsubsidized employment. One of the data pieces that we also are looking to get a better handle on for this cohort and future cohorts is also income data. So a lot of transitional employment programs will do wage bumps to get a better understanding of kind of average annual income prior to and post employment, and that's something that we're exploring now.
Okay, thank you. And then what data do you maintain around victimization?
So the Pathways program does look at victimization data for up to 2 years for their ambassadors. I don't have that number readily available, but we can follow up and send that to you. The Pathways program, like violence intervention, reviews incidents daily to make sure that alum, to cross-check whether or not any alum were involved. And they also have representation at that weekly CVI coordination meeting. So if an alum were to be impacted by an incident, they would get immediate notification to re-engage that ambassador.
Okay, and this is still a relatively new program, but is the plan to maintain this data over time so that we'll be able to look back and say, here's where our graduates are after 6 months completion, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, and demonstrate success that way, or just effect?
Yeah, so definitely up to 2 years, we're exploring how much longer beyond the 2-year mark we'd like to track that. We know that long-term supports and services are really key to the success of participants. So we're likely going to extend our tracking measures beyond that 2-year mark, but that's absolutely the case. And one of the things we're doing now across the agency, but that will also be positively impacting the Pathways program, is modernizing some of our data collection and standardizing it across programs. because we also have clients that touch multiple programs, and we want to be able to see those touches. You know, were they at one point served by FSS? Had they ever been engaged by a violence interrupter in the community that potentially referred them to the program? Right there, it's really a continuum of services, and we want to be able to structure our data infrastructure to speak to that.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And you mentioned the Department of Employment Services as one of your partners. Can you talk a little bit about how Pathways partners with other district agencies or nonprofit organizations to provide these types of services, and if there's any, or what the collaboration is like with CSOSA?
Sure. I'll speak to CSOSA as it pertains to our Pathways program. They are the second largest source of referrals, separate from our violence interrupters. That has been a partnership. Another key partner has been the Department of For-Hire Vehicles through our Promise Rides. That initiative helps to get our Pathways ambassadors to and from and to job interviews, et cetera. We've worked closely with the Department of Behavioral Health. They've been really good. Also, OSSE Reengagement, they're located within our building. OSSE Reengagement has been a good partner for referrals for different credentials and also for education. You mentioned DOES. They work hand in hand with us for subsidized employment placements. And also through the People of Promise initiative, there are a number of agencies that through the mayoral mandate are now engaging in subsidized work placements, such as DDOT. They've been really good. In fact, we have directors that are mentoring People of Promise. I would say one of the most notable examples would be Director Matthews from CFSA. He's now attending the Pathways graduations. He's in regular contact with his People of Promise. That's been really good. Also, I can't leave out DPW. We've done nearly 40 placements for DPW for leaf employment, both seasonal and term positions. So they've been a great partner as well. Those are just a few. I know I'm forgetting some, but the response and support from district government has been terrific.
Fantastic. And back to our favorite data question, have all of those partner agencies been, I want to phrase this, as eager as you all seem to be to track this data of success for the graduates?
Yes, I think that they're dependent on us to be the repository for information because we're the home base for many of these referrals. So yes, absolutely. The mayor has imparted a sense of not just urgency in doing this work, but also the necessity to be able to demonstrate the value of these investments.
Thank you. So one of the services Pathways offers its ambassadors is therapy. And this is something that I want to give you and the agency a lot of credit for, because you're clearly doing something right with this. And there's been a lot of positive reviews. I just want to read an excerpt from the DC Auditor's report of the NEAR Act from last year. She says, Pathways has refined its program offerings since it started. After acute mental health needs of ambassadors became more apparent, Pathways contracted in FY 2019 with Community Wellness Ventures to provide on-site mental health services, including individual and group therapy. These services were intended to incorporate the cultural sensitivity needed to work effectively with high-risk young men who have experienced acute trauma and regard mental health care as taboo. The report goes on to note that an external partner working with Pathways said in an interview that offering services on site normalized behavioral health care and removed any stigma, that it was, quote, striking to see ambassadors participate in and request therapy. This seems like something that really highlights the impact that ONSE's work can have. Can you talk about what you've seen in terms of these Pathways ambassadors being willing to participate in therapy and the effect it's had on them?
Sure, Ms. Yeo.
Absolutely. Community Wellness Ventures has been a terrific partner. They've now worked with us for over 3 years with the Pathways program. And as the audit notes, they have a really experienced team of mental health practitioners who are highly trained in areas that not a lot of clinicians are trained in, like community violence and racialized trauma. They have been able to work collaboratively with the program manager and program staff on how to first kind of introduce this component of the program. So we're not sitting down on day one with an hour-and-a-half psychosocial assessment, right? Like we're getting to know one another. We're talking about the benefit of these services. And everything from kind of naming what the group sessions are called to having quiet spaces in the building where individuals can go on a flexible basis to talk one-on-one if that's needed. We were so pleased with kind of service utilization and with our ambassadors' feedback in that program that one of the things violence intervention did that the director spoke to in his testimony in FY22 was start to bring similar services to neighborhoods. So, Pathways only has 25 individuals in any given cohort, but we know a lot of other participants or clients that VIs are working with would be interested in seeking those services. So the launch of trauma-informed care groups allowed us to take that model and expand it into neighborhoods. We've worked with 9 communities since the launch of those trauma-informed care groups to bring neighborhood-based sessions to clients. And again, the conversation, the introduction in particular, you don't need to fill out a long form in advance. You don't need to provide a bunch of information up front. You go to your first session alongside friends or neighbors, as well as your violence interrupter, get to know the clinician. We incentivize participation in those as well, especially for our young adults who are working, just commuting to and from and taking time out of work or other activities. We want to make sure that they are compensated financially for that time, and that we know that we appreciate that they're valuing this service. So kind of across the board, we are very pleased with how we have been able to really just adapt our service delivery approach so that it best fits our clients, and service utilization has been, the indication of our success there.
Interesting. Thank you so much. That's helpful to hear. Next, I want to talk a little bit about ONSE's growth over the past several years and how the agency has managed its growth. First, on a general level, how has ONSE managed the influx of funding over the past couple of years? Of course, as we've heard today, more funding is usually not a bad thing, but I imagine it also creates challenges for figuring out how to ramp up programming in a way that's sustainable.
Sure. I want to tap in Chief of Staff Marcus Ellis. He oversees HR. Can you speak to our expansion efforts and our hiring, which is going really well, some of the space considerations, and again, how we've managed to double in size, basically?
Absolutely. Thank you, Director, and thank you, Council Member. You're correct. In 2018, when we cut that ribbon out front, ONSE was approximately 10 staff members, and now we're headed over 100. And one of the key elements that you mentioned is that as you get new staff and as you expand programming, you have to be very careful because we work with a very sensitive population and spreading mistakes can be a thing. And so we've been very incremental with our growth, using data to help kind of drive that in our expansion. OLA is a great example of that. I think that when we first started in Anacostia, we might have been in there 6 months and folks wanted us in 12 schools like the next school year. And, we had to kind of pull back from that and say, we really want to analyze and see what's working and what's not working before doing so. I think you see the same thing with Pathways in terms of the growth that we're taking there. Starting out, initially, the NEAR Act required us to serve approximately 50, exactly 50 as a matter of fact. And for us to be headed toward 200 now, it's been a process because there are so many safety concerns that come with expanding a program such as that. And then we always have to be aware of the fact that on the other end of expanding a Pathways programs, you also need to make sure you're expanding employment opportunities. And so it's definitely been a process. We've kind of looked at the entire landscape with that. I think that when we talk about expanding to the new building, for example, that's huge for us. We are actively looking for seats at ONSE. Let me just say it that way as we continue to grow. This building is a perfect location for us. It was located in a space where our clientele could feel safe. But as the director said, we've more than tripled in size. And so that new building isn't just going to help us in terms of expanding our programmatic offering, but our staffing as well.
And I'll also speak, if I could, council member, in addition to growing the number of staff, we've grown our portfolio of non-personnel services funding administration, specifically around grants. I'm proud to report that one big difference, we now have a general counsel, Camille Tucker. We also have hired recently 2 new grants management specialists, and also our partnership with PLC, our new partnership with the Progressive Life Center has been instrumental in strengthening that protocol. We are developing a new grant policy, and also there is a new external distribution of funds approval process to ensure that we are safeguarding public dollars. So those are all things that I am really excited about it, that I guess speaks to, well, I'd like to think that speaks to one's commitment to doing this and doing this in the best way possible. I think when your organization is growing, many people have had to wear many different hats. Now we're at a point where we now have the supports in place and people that are able to specifically to take deep dives over these purviews. So I'm excited about that.
Thank you so much. So looking at the Violence Intervention Initiative, this program is inherently decentralized, as we've talked a little bit about today, because it's operating at the neighborhood level. But it's now, is it accurate that it's grown to 25 different neighborhoods? So how does ONSE effectively manage a problem that is decentralized, but has grown both in size and complexity? For example, the hiring of nonprofits to hire and supervise violence interrupters, but also the contracting for case management services. One of the nonprofits, the Far Southeast Family Strengthening Collaborative, subcontracts with J&J Monitoring to hire and oversee VIs. So how do you ensure that quality services in a system that requires coordination and high pressure and high intensity services by so many organizations at once?
We have simplified that. Currently, this fiscal year, we're working what I'll call directly with practitioners. So for instance, just to give you an example, like last year, Training Grounds was the prime, and Training Grounds, great organization, have nothing but respect for that organization. But Dwayne Falwell was a part of that organization. He sort of led their VI efforts, and now we're working directly with Mr. Falwell and his Together We Rise organization, and we've done that across the board with our service providers. So we're working directly with practitioners. I think that strengthens accountability when you don't have a prime and a sub relationship, but you're working directly with the prime, and the prime happens to be the provider. That has been a huge benefit for us. And again, while we're in 25 different priority communities, there are still 4 primary organizations that oversee those 25 communities. Again, there's a provider for wards 1 and 4. There's one provider in Ward 5, right, which spans several different communities. And there's one provider for Ward 6 and 7, and there's one for 8. I hope that answers your question, Councilmember.
I think so. I think it's something that I'd like to kind of dive into a little bit more with you as we go through the year and think about kind of how the expansion has gone and what can be streamlined. So as Pathways has expanded and ONSE has ensured that it maintains quality and can draw on very specialized resources, and I'm thinking about things like DYRS, credible messengers, and pathmakers. How can we scale up that program without stretching beyond what we can get out of those resources?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? You went out just a second.
So I'm thinking of when people say we need more funding for more credible messengers and more path makers, because these services are so intensive in communities. How do we expand your budget and your service offerings without stretching beyond what we can get out of those resources?
Well, I think that's a broader conversation. Our new deputy mayor is laser focused on increasing coordination, streamlining when necessary, and making the necessary tweaks to how we approach all facets of violence intervention. So that's something that we're having conversations on. I don't want to overstep, because I think that's more of a macro level issue beyond ONSE. What I can say is internally, what we're doing, the message is that there needs to be more coordination, and we've taken that to heart. And that Tuesday convening, like, sort of personifies that. And I can't. I know I've referenced it a few times. It's because it's a very powerful and impactful meeting that is going to lead to greater. It already is. We're seeing the benefits of having that. It's leading to greater. We're seeing joint mediations. We're seeing referrals for service delivery. It's informing everything that we do. And I think that is going to set the foundation for even greater things to come.
Okay. Can you provide an example of something that you've learned that no longer works as you've been expanding your service offerings?
Something that no longer works, like
we've talked a little bit about lessons learned and how you've expanded, but has there been anything, a strategy or a program that just was not working that you've kind of diverted from?
Deputy McDaniel, you want to chime in there?
Are we speaking agency-wide or specifically for Pathways, council member?
I'm thinking agency-wide, but it's okay if it's specific to Pathways.
Got it. One of the things we did recognize that was we'd evolved beyond was sticking to the traditional model of violence intervention, always deploying 2 VIs to a community as our cookie cutter approach. One of the things we recognize is every community has a unique identity. Every community's violence or virus is a little bit different as to what drives their incidents, who the key players are. So we begin to take on what we call a prescriptive approach to violence intervention. Once we get into a community, we may recognize that different investments are needed or some adjustments to our traditional model may be needed. So we've opened ourselves up to being more flexible as we go into communities to provide additional investments that allow them to evolve, build upon that traditional VI model, and maybe have other elements we add to really help them be more successful in their work.
Okay. Thank you. That's a good example and helpful to keep in mind as we're being responsive to the differences in each neighborhood. So I want to go back to our conversation about coordination between other agencies. And I hear you that this is a focus of the deputy mayor and a lot of what she's going to be focused on. But as you know, sometimes it's talked about in the press or in these hearings or otherwise, there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen when it comes to violence interruption work. And violence prevention efforts more broadly. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's important to have the right coordination. So from ONSE's perspective, and I hear you, without stepping on the toes of the deputy mayor, how is ONSE working to coordinate with other agencies whose work is complementary? We talked a little bit about the mediations that have started with the Office of Attorney General's Cure the Streets program, which in theory is very similar to ONSE's violence prevention program. And the mayor has raised the question recently whether these 2 programs should be merged. I know it's something that we've talked about for many years. It's something that came up with our public witnesses. And so I think you can elaborate a little bit on your coordination with other agencies, but also specifically with Cure the Streets, how your interactions have been and how your experience is informing the mayor's decisions and next steps here.
Sure. There are multiple parts to that. I would say that the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, under the leadership of Director Harley Harper, has been instrumental in bringing agencies together through some of the ARPA investments. Portions of that sits with the Office of Victim Services and Justice Grants, right? Some of the trauma-informed care and housing, right? But DPW has an employment piece, right? We have a programmatic piece. We work closely with her and with that office to ensure that we are tracking to spend that money in accordance with the initial funding mandate. So that's one area I think that has been a bright spot. And I would say to your second question about how we're coordinating with Cure, again, that Tuesday model, that Tuesday meeting has been just one. There always was a mutual respect and coordination amongst frontline staff, right? So these are relationships. I won't name them by name, but they're well known, right? We're they've been well known. They've been in the space. Many of them have worked for some of our other organizations, or we've collaborated in some capacity. So we aren't strangers, right? We aren't strangers. They've been a part of this violence prevention ecosystem for some time. Now, I think the difference is that a formalized approach to collaborating is what we are doing now. Those referrals, again, I heard loud and clear. I remember I was in one of our very first meeting, and one of the violence interrupters from the Trinidad community said, well, hey, we don't have weeks. We need immediate services now, now. What was the mandate, and can we make referrals? And I know we've been working specifically with VIs like him and others, and then now their faith in government is increased by, okay, I had John, I made a referral to John, and wow, now John is in Pathways. Now John has graduated Pathways. So that it's going to take some time, but I can say with a great degree of confidence that we are much further along than where we were just a year ago.
Okay. And in terms of building blocks and people of promise, well, I guess first for people of promise, which units are ones responsible for?
Well, people of promise, we oversee the entirety of the initiative. Does that answer your question?
Okay. Okay. And so my understanding, I guess, around the transfer for parts of the program was that the person-based piece of it was coming to ones. Is that the same idea that you all are now overseeing the entire program of People of Promise?
That's right. That's right. You maybe, I'm not sure if you're referring to maybe like the 150 blocks or maybe building blocks. I know that there's been like multiple descriptions of it, but the People of Promise work began with the study, which was conducted through funding from the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, and then led to the creation of the most at-risk individuals, or it was initially referred to as the drivers of gun violence, and that evolved into the People of Promise work.
Okay, thank you. Yes, that is what I was referring to, the building blocks stand up and how, transferring over some of that work to ones has worked in practice this year.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So the many of the, and I know the things have changed in terms of how we describe them and how we articulate them, but they have been threaded together through People of Promise, right? So while the funding for employment may have been initially requested, DPW, let's say seasonal leaf employment and term employment may have been requested under building blocks, and it is a BBDC investment, that execution is now through People of Promise, right? So as an example, there were nearly 50 slots for unsubsidized employment through DPW. We have made over 40 referrals, people who are working now. And then also there are others that are in the queue still undergoing background checks. So that BBDC investment came into fruition through the People of Promise.
Got it. Okay. And speaking of agency coordination, what is the level of coordination like with MPD and ONSE?
We work with MPD very closely. Every business day, every weekday morning at 8:30, we're reviewing incidents from the last 24 hours, and then that informs, of course, we're first to know very early on if there's a critical incident. That is the very first call, and we're immediately triaging. In many instances, we may have already heard about it if it's in a designated community, but it helps to paint a clearer picture of what's happening at the macro level, and then sometimes what's happening throughout the city as a whole. So that's just like one facet of how we partner with MPD that I would say has been successful.
Okay, and I want to be sensitive about this next question because I understand that a lot of this work relies on trust and building trust and credibility so that people can open up and get the services that they need. But when a circumstance is continuing, and intervention work has not been, or does not seem like it's going to be effective. How are we using that information in informing, or are we, law enforcement to be involved in the most high tense situations that have not proven effective in interrupting the violence?
I would say that there's not an expectation that VIs work with law enforcement directly. We think that it's very important that there are lines, of communication. We view the work to be complementary in a sense. We, of course, respect the work of law enforcement, but our efforts are rooted in prevention, and that has been our approach.
Okay, thank you. So let's talk about funding. One of the pieces that came up today from our public witnesses is around how ONSE programs have been funded, and that sometimes there are short-term contracts with organizations getting one-year grants, which may make it difficult for organizations to feel secure and do the kind of long-term planning that might be necessary for sustained success. Has ONSE experimented with awarding any long-term grants, and do you think that's something that warrants a change in practices or policies?
I do not. Currently, for the grants that we issue for the violence intervention, community-based organizations, we have a base year and 2 options, so a total of 3 years. That's our current model. Prior to that, we had a base and 3 option years. And again, for the 4 years that we have oversaw those VI contracts and now grants, we had the same organizations. The change was only recently, where we switched from contracts to grants, and then of course we went to a base plus 2 option years. We think that is the, of course we're open we're open to exploring other models. I don't want to make it seem as if we're closed-minded, but that has worked. But there are some other supports that we've been able to implement through our partnership with Progressive Life Center. Again, you heard from Mr. Falwell. Mr. Falwell, now operates that business. He has the support that is necessary. We are coaching these organizations on everything from reconciling funds to proper record keeping, and it's worked well because it streamlines communication and increases accountability. But I'm open if there are any other best practices, and some other district government agencies are doing some things a little differently. We would love to see what evidence that they have, and then we'd be open to that.
So thinking ahead to budget season coming up, ONSE has received significant budget increases over the last 2 years, but part of that was largely due to the federal COVID relief funds that the district was receiving. So is the agency concerned about facing a funding cliff, and how are you thinking about the type of long-term planning as you prepare what your needs are for the mayor's proposed budget?
Sure. So our FY24 request is currently under review by the mayor, and look forward to her initial proposal to the council. And then we think that our budget hearing is going to provide a really good time for us to dig into the details of what that entails.
Okay. I understand you're not going to give me much more than that. I guess I am worried, I'll say, about all of our agencies and the funding cliff that agencies have come to rely on this funding, but it of course wasn't ever intended to be a sustained funding from the federal government. And so as we go through the process, it will be helpful to continue conversations with you all about what services and programs are really at most risk, and how we can support you all.
I look forward to having that conversation with the committee and the mayor, of course. So looking forward to that joint conversation.
Can you talk about how ONSE has integrated restorative justice programming into your other programs and what outcomes you've seen from that restorative justice program?
Sure, Ms. McDaniel.
Thank you, Director. So originally, ONSE was tasked with developing a separated standalone restorative justice unit. What we found in our work, one of the other adjustments and evolutions we've made is that restorative justice is actually an approach that should be a way we do business with all of our 5 divisions as opposed to a separate standing division. So we've trained all of our staff in restorative justice. We've trained all of our violence intervention contractors in restorative justice. We've also trained some sister agencies and individuals from outside contractors, as well as community residents in restorative justice practices. One of the strategies we use is we embed restorative justice in each of our 5 divisions. Our managers are required to identify what the typical restorative justice responses or proactive interventions they employ, and then we track those with our individual divisions. Data, we're building out our data tracking system so that all of that data can be housed in one central place, so that we're not, each division doesn't have something separate and we're bouncing around. We have a central spot where we can pull restorative justice. What we have seen is primarily that the practice has been more responsive as opposed to proactive. And so we're just trying to get caught up and hopefully can get in front of some of what we're seeing. We have a lot of communities that reach out to us, so we employ restorative justice responses as a result, as well as a lot of grief and healing requests. So not just to restore balance between victim and offender. What we're seeing more of is communities that call out for us to help them through grief and healing and restoring themselves after a trauma.
Thank you. And I don't know if you heard the pastor's testimony earlier, but she was talking about how grateful she was to some of the grief counseling and the peace services that you all led. So on her behalf and on behalf of everybody else who's benefited from those services, thank you for that work. It seems very effective and impactful. What would you say is our greatest need right now in terms of reducing violence in the short term, and how can ONSE help us get there?
That's I would say there's a multifaceted response to that. Coordination, I think, is one. That's been the theme. Also, the work of other agencies. Again, wearing my DPR hat, I think that there's more that we can do, more that we will do, from the expansion of hours to empowering recreators to engage specifically our youth around youth violence. I think that that's a portion of engaging youth through more robust engaging youth in a more robust manner is a portion of it. We know there's a national gun conversation that the country has to have, where we prioritize we prioritize stopping the flow of illegal guns, and now ghost guns has been a part of it as well. So I would say that those are a few things that come to mind. I would also say that we know it isn't government alone, right? There's more for the faith-based community to do. There's more for elders within our communities to do. There's more for families individually to do as well. So I think that those are all facets of what must be discussed as we think about like how we grapple with what we're dealing with as a city and as a nation.
Okay, thank you. And we'll certainly continue pressing on all of those levers for this holistic response to what I think is our greatest crisis and challenge as a city right now. So you are wearing 2 hats, as we've talked a little bit about, Director, and have done a great job in both of your roles. Do you have a sense, though, when the mayor may be nominating a permanent director for ONSE?
I would have to defer to the mayor on such an announcement, but it definitely is a priority. It definitely is a priority, and it's something that they're working on with a sense of urgency.
Okay. I guess I'll say, understanding you can't get out front of the mayor on an announcement like that, there are other agencies who may share with the public if there's a national search going on, or if there's something in that realm, but I don't know if you can share that type of information with the committee.
Sure, I can. I do know that the job was posted on both moda.dc.gov and together.dc.gov, and it is my understanding that candidates both local and nationally are and have been or are being evaluated.
Okay, thank you. So at this committee's FY 2023 budget hearing last March, one stated that it had 39 vacant positions. How many vacant positions do you currently have?
Let's see, I am looking at this information. We have 22 current vacant positions, but we have 83 that we have filled, and we're nearly at 80% capacity. Or 80% of our FTEs have been filled, rather. I think that's a better descriptor.
Okay. And are those vacant positions posted, or again, are those usually found through community referrals? And
no, the majority are in recruitment. They're in various phases. Some we're interviewing for, some we're undergoing background checks for, and others are we're still accepting applications for.
Got it. Okay. I do want to note concerns about the annual report. So I'm very happy to hear that the website will soon be updated with a lot of the data that we've talked about today that seems like there's been a lot of progress on. And so we'll look forward to that by the end of the month. We talked about the pre-hearing questions to try to get those to the committee in advance so we can review those all robustly before the hearing. But the annual report, what is the plan to submit your annual report?
We have our data now from 2022, and we're working with the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice on final edits to that information and then we'll release it in short order. Again, our hope is to have our website fully up to date with those 2022 numbers by the end of this month.
Okay, great. All right. Well, is there anything else, Director, that we didn't get a chance to talk about that you want to flag for the committee or the public?
No, I think we've covered it all. I think we've covered a lot of ground. Thank you. This has been a great conversation, and congratulations to you as the new committee chair. So looking forward to working with you in this capacity.
Thank you so much. Well, likewise, and thank you to you, Director, and your entire staff. It's doing very difficult and very good work on behalf of our community. I really appreciate the huge effort and the head and the heart that this takes. So there being no further business before the committee, the time is now 3:18 p.m.